Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has sharingan in danmachi. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by CapCaverna and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Prologue. I was looking at my phone and trying to message my friend to know if he was already inside while waiting in line to enter the convention. I had been to one convention before, but this was the first time I was actually doing cosplay, so I was very excited. Truth be told, me and my friend had wanted to come as the main character from Overlord, I wearing Momon's armor and my friend in his skeleton robes, but, as it was my first time, the armor had turned out so shitty I was too ashamed to wear it and my friend had similar trouble, so we went with our second option, the fast option. Cosplaying as Uchiha Shisui was incredibly easy, dark blue clothes, a forehead protector, some contact lens, sandals, a leather chest protector and a foam sword at my back, and I was done, less than 3 days to get it all and extremely convenient since we were out of time. My friend's costume as Itachi was even easier with a large coat in place of the clothes. The bastard, I bet it was cheaper than mine too. Suddenly I noticed a loud noise coming from above, so I looked up and stared directly at a burning piece of debris as it smashed right through my upper body, pulverizing my head and chest, sending what remained of my body flying and on fire, while leaving a 2 meters wide hole in the ground and pelting the bystanders with pieces of bone and asphalt. Floating there above what little remained of my body, a hand, most of a forearm and 2 legs, I continued to stare stunned. Well, that just happened. I couldn't help but say, at least it had been so fast I didn't even have time to feel pain. I was floating in the air a little above the crater, my body now transparent and without any strength. Stunned, I tried to touch one of the pieces of my body, only to pass right through it. Shit, I was a ghost, wasn't I? Looking at everyone screaming in horror or running away from the scene, I felt strangely detached. A fat guy trying to crawl away while screaming like a little. 2 hot girls wearing Alliance of Legends costumes frozen in shock. A mother cradling a little boy in a Darth Vader costume who had been hit by one of my bones. I wondered if anyone was gonna miss me. Fuck, thinking about my life, I never really did anything that I liked, always doing what others expected of me, always worried about how other would think, always trying to appear normal, always too afraid to step up, to do something. Shit, I had even died a virgin because I was too stupid to ask a girl out. If I knew it was gonna end so soon, I would have done things differently. A loud guttural voice spoke from behind me, its words echoing in my very soul as it seemed to shake the world around me, and I felt pain at my very core. Filled with dread, I noticed my extremities had started to dissipate in the air. Almost unable to stop myself, I turned and looked at the thing that had spoken. Eyes and mouths and too many limbs coming out of tentacles made from screaming heads. They were all looking at me, all staring as if I was a particularly interesting insect. Then the tentacles shifted, revealing what laid inside them, and I screamed as I tried to claw my eyes out. Tried to rip out my own heart or bash my skull until it caved in, but my hands had dissolved and I couldn't even close my eyes. I screamed until my entire body had dissolved and I didn't have lungs anymore, and then did it some more anyway. I felt myself snap back into sanity as suddenly as I had died. I didn't feel my body recovering and couldn't speak anymore, but the last thing I remembered was looking at something and then darkness. Sorry, didn't mean to appear like that, but you were kind of a last-minute addition and I was getting ready to leave. Crouching in front of me was a young Steve Buscemi wearing a white shirt and jeans. He poked at me with mild interest and I wondered if this was the devil. I had always thought he would look like Al Pacino. I don't think you'll want to see what I really look like again, huh? He commented before lifting me up in his hand and turning what remained of my soul from side to side. Don't worry, it seems you're still salvageable. A bit more effort than what I was looking for, but what can I do? I didn't really remember what I had seen, but I still shuddered. I did not want to go through that again. What now, do I go to hell? I doubt I deserve heaven, but I don't think I did anything bad enough to burn for all eternity. Well, usually I tend to give you guys the illusion of choice, offer to let you go and all that, but we all know you're all gonna take the reincarnation option in the end. The creature shrugged and swiped a strand of hair out of his eye. So let's see, where can I send you? Nope, already did that one there. There's already a lot of them playing over there, no reason not to do it myself. As for skills, yeah, you don't have anywhere near enough good karma for something good. Nope, no broken system or inspect for you. Nope, ha, you'd like that, wouldn't you? Snort. You really think we don't know when your kind is trying to game us by exploiting some weak skill? The creature continued answering questions before I had ever formulated them, leaving me incredibly frustrated and confused as it kept me inside its hand. Then it focused back on me and sighed heavily. Fine, I suppose it's kind of my fault for letting you look where you shouldn't, and I'm not completely opposed to making someone up every once in a while, but you will only get the eyes, not the entire body. What? I wanted to ask him, but the second I tried to speak I felt a wave of pain wash over what remained on my being. DSK, don't try to speak, the creature chided me while bringing me closer to his face and poking me with a finger. Now let me ask you, do you prefer random rebirth or keeping your current body? Yeah, probably for the best, since a medieval society, even one with magic, isn't the best place to be a baby, or a girl, or the poor, or well you get it, plus there's already a neat spawning mechanic over there, so I can even save some power when building your body. Let me just fix you up a little and done. Well, here you go. Then the bastard squeezed his hand and everything went black. I woke up in darkness, held in place by walls around me, as if the thing had squeezed me inside a box. Testing the limits of my box, I felt the wall in front of me give a little, so I braced myself against the back of the box and pressed my shoulder against it before pushing as hard as I could. But the sound of breaking glass, the wall shattered and I half fell out of the box into a forest, light coming from the ceiling as if it was illuminated by thousands of lamps. Looking around myself, I noticed I was a meter from the floor, hanging from a dark gash on the wall, so I put my arms around the rough stone and pulled myself free, falling on all fours on the soft grass. Taking a few seconds, alright it was quite a few minutes, to freak out. I finally managed to gather my wits and take some deep breaths, then I pinched my arm to see if that would wake me up. It didn't. I started hyperventilating again. Patting my clothes to get rid of the dirt and trying to use my hands to comb my short hair back into place, I took stock of my situation once more, while pretending I hadn't just had a panic attack. At first I thought I was still wearing my cosplay, but, upon closer inspection, I noticed my clothes had much better quality. They fit me better, and even the leather armor in my chest was much harder and heavier, with a layer of metal underneath it for some actual protection. Grabbing at my back, I pulled my foam sword to notice it now became shining steel with a wicked edge. Passing it lightly over my arm, actually shaved off my hair better than a razor. Using the sword side, I checked my reflection, only to find two red eyes with three tomo, each staring right back at me. Holy shit, I had freaking sharingans. Channeling power into my eyes happened almost on instinct, and I saw the tomo starting to rotate until they took the form of a pinwheel with a back dot on the center. Turning towards a tree, I tried to burn it with a Materasu, but nothing happened. Damn, did I have to train it or something? What did that thing say again? It was answering questions I hadn't even thought to ask, so, of course, if I had to ask for one of those overpowered eyes, I'd try for the greatest of them all, the one capable of Kodomatsukami. I had Shisui's eyes, and he never had a Materasu. Eager to test it out, I instead concentrated on the one ability common to all Uchiha. Around myself, a green flame appeared, starting to condense into a single gigantic bone around my body. Then the side effects hit me. I felt a terrifying pain. My eyes were killing me. Grabbing at my face with both hands, I felt them being covered in blood before exhaustion hit me, and I passed out. I woke up with a groan. My eyes were still hurting a little, and I now had a killer headache to go with it. At least I wasn't face down on the floor anymore. Instead I felt a straw bed under me, not exactly the most comfortable, but the creature had said I'd be in medieval times. Hey, you survived. Came a cheerful voice from the open door. It only drove another spike of pain on my head. We'd all thought you're gonna die, since the banshee herself threw you into the inn, but guess not. Opening a single eye, I glared at the man on the door. The guy wore an old green shirt and was completely average, except for the pair of cat ears atop his head. He seemed somewhat amused at my predicament. Hey, don't glare, it's not my fault you gave yourself a mind down. He entered the room and put a plate of soup on the table before helping me up into a sitting position and handing me a cup of water. Anyways, how the hell did a newbie like you make it all the way down here? Here, where? I asked while patting myself to see there was nothing missing besides my sword, which I found hanging by a chair. Rivera, of course. What other town did you think you'd find inside the dungeon? He said, and then noticed me looking for my things. Yeah, don't worry, nobody dared touch anything, since the banshee paid for it herself, and even boars don't wanna mess with her. Anyway, what's your name? Ugh, I'm Roland Sinclair. I was still disoriented by my headache, but dungeon, what the heck? And I didn't even know I was inside a dungeon. I'm Villy, by the way, and damn, that's some vicious prank someone is playing on you, the catman said, and started walking away, not really that curious, or just unwilling to get involved anyway. You're gonna be here for a while, the Goliath just spawned, and you're gonna have to wait for some big shot to slay it before you could make it upside again. Drink your soup when you're feeling better, come down, I'm sure boars will be able to figure things out. He waved me away and I cradled my head once more. This reincarnation thing was already turning out worse than I thought, and what the heck was a mind down? Did I run out of chakra or something? A few minutes later I managed to get out of the bed and sit at the table to start drinking my soup. It was thin and without spices, but I was hungry enough, it didn't matter right now, so I devoured the entire thing and reclined back into the chair. The headache was still strong but no longer crippling. Finally making my way downstairs, I saw a plethora of different people wearing all kinds of classic adventure gear, from full plates to mage robes, and anything in between. Some of them glanced my way with frowning looks, but I ignored them until I saw the catman waving me over towards a large, muscular man with an eye patch. So you're the guy who dared go after the banshee, huh? The eye patch man said while grabbing my shoulder and invading my personal space. Tell me your secret, boy, did you really tap that? What? The woman, did you tap that? He embraced me and made a very lecherous face. I mean, she terrifies me, but I can't deny the elf is hot. I don't even know who you're talking about. I protested and the guy forced me into the seat before his face became serious again. So how did a little newbie like you find yourself down here? He asked while taking a huge drink from a wooden mug. I don't remember, I barely remember my name really, I told him, and it wasn't exactly a lie, I didn't remember anything from this world. Well, you don't have any head wounds, but I guess the banshee could have healed you. Boars must, and took another swing of his beer anyway. From your disposition, I'd guess you're a very new level 1, so you're stuck here until someone slays the Goliath, and even then, if you don't manage to get a group, it's unlikely you'll make it to the surface by yourself. Can't I just get someone to take me up then? I asked while massaging my temple. Do you have a lot of coins with you? Because nobody will want to take care of a newbie in the middle floors unless you can make it worth the danger. Boars laid back and, seeing my look, look, your familia will probably come get you soon and, worst case, you can probably return with the Loki or Ganesha familia expeditions. They're big and powerful enough not to mind a single newbie tagging along. Wait, Loki familia? Dungeon. I started to connect the dots. I was in Danmachi, wasn't I, home of the asshole gods and overpowered adventurers. Shit, I had only read the first few volumes of the manga. Why couldn't I have been sent to Naruto or Avatar where I knew the entire plot? Releasing a groan, I let my forehead bang against the table in frustration. I was stuck deep inside the dungeon and didn't have any coin whatsoever. How was I gonna eat? Where would I sleep? From what I remember, this was supposed to be a safe floor, but monsters could still come from other floors, so even foraging wasn't very safe, much less sleeping outside the city. Glancing at the muscular wanted pirate, I asked, you wouldn't know how I could get some coin, would you? Well, your gear seems to be high quality, so I could pay you some valis for the sword and armor, let's say around 15,000 for the set. Boars patted a pouch on his hip. I didn't know how much my gear was worth, but judging by the glint in the man's eye, he was probably trying to cheat me. Plus, I'd be without a weapon, inside a dungeon, with murderous monsters, not something I was eager for. Good joke. No, seriously, is there any way to earn some money around here? Well, there's a lot of adventures waiting for the Goliath to be slain, so I could use some help in exchange for food and letting you crash at my room, said the catman who was passing through their table, before continuing to serve what seemed like dinner. Noticing the frown on my face, Boar smirked at me. You're an adventurer, alright, don't like doing housework. Then the arrogant bastard took the time to pick at his nose dismissively before continuing, tell you what, nobody's gonna want a green rookie like you to delve into the tree labyrinth, but I could get you a job as a supporter, for a price. And what exactly would I have to do? I asked suspiciously while narrowing my eyes at the man, his whole greedy face just screamed scammer. Wow, don't you have some creepy eyes? Don't worry, I don't deal with shady things. Plenty of money to be made the legal way if you know how to do it. He took another swing of his mug and wiped his mouth with his arm before releasing a burp. You just have to carry their gear, stay out of the way, keep yourself safe, and harvest the monsters for drops and magic stones. And what's in it for you? 35% of what you get. I was about to protest, but he leaned over the table and glared at me. Don't even try, a supporter won't be making all that much, so it's just not worth my time for anything less. Plus I'll be making sure you actually get paid. And chose a more respectable group. No telling what can happen in the dungeon if you try to find a group by yourself. Shit, he was right. I didn't read the manga all that long, but I know the tropes. There's bound to be a lot of assholes in the dungeon who wouldn't mind killing me just for the gear on my body, even if they weren't that great. Trying to ignore my headache, I considered his offer. I didn't really know if I could trust the guy, but he at least would have an interest in seeing me come back alive since I'd be paying him, and, even if the pay was small, it would probably be worth more than my average equipment, so I didn't really have to trust him to find a good group, but his greed. Plus I'd get to observe some experienced adventurers with my sharingan and copy their moves so I wouldn't have to fight for them. Well, it's the dungeon, so there's always the chance of a monster party and ambushes. You'll have to at least survive long enough for them to finish everything off, but nobody will be expecting you to kill anything. Alright, I agreed and almost banged my head against the table when the guy patted my back with the strength of an elephant. Great, you can rest and recover today and leave tomorrow with the party I found. I have a good feeling about you, boy, don't disappoint me too much. Seeing as disappointing him probably meant I'd be dead again, I'd try not to do it at all if I could help it, ready to go back to my room and try to sleep my headache away. I started to push my chair back before remembering one last thing. Hey boars, this banshee you guys keep mentioning saved me, who's she? Vilvis Chalia from Dionysus Familia, he told me with an unusually serious voice. She's a survivor from the nightmare on the 27th floor, and since then everyone who gets into a party with her dies. She kills then? I asked in surprise. I thought the guild kept things like that from happening in Danmachi. Who the hell knows, plenty of adventurers die every week in the dungeon, it could just be luck. He sighed and finished his beer. Personally, I saw her when she returned from the nightmare. She spent weeks covered in blood, her hair all messed up, and with a crazed look in her eyes. I think it broke her, and now she just runs away whenever there's real danger. But, no matter the truth, nobody wants to risk an unreliable fighter. Yeah, thinking about it I know it's cruel, but I probably wouldn't party up with someone like that either. An unreliable supporter wouldn't cause too much trouble, but a fighter who ran away could probably mess with the entire formation. Anyway, I have money to make, see you tomorrow kid. Grabbing his mug he tied it. Whoa, his belt and got up before throwing a few coins to the table. Use it to pay for another night here. I'll take it from your pay later, with interest of course. Asshole. Grabbing the coins I approached a busy valley. Hey, is this enough for another night? Yeah, Boars left you just enough for it and a meal, the catman told me, while filling another plate with soup for his other costumes. Anything else I can do for you? You got a mirror around here I could use? Sure, I have a small one on the back. Putting the plate down, he took a second to search inside the kitchen and came back with a handheld mirror a little bigger than my hand, then continued serving his guests. Going back to my room I locked the door and took off my shirt. The mirror was small, but I managed to check out the fauna on my back for the first time. At first I thought I didn't have one, but then I remembered gods had to use blood to activate it. Cutting one of my fingers with the sword, I let it drop full over my shoulder, finally revealing my status. It looked like a huge eye surrounded by tentacles with the information written in English between the spaces. Chapter 1. The next day after waking up and eating breakfast, Boars handed me a huge backpack and told me to follow him, almost dragging me away from the inn and leading me into a small gathering of rough-looking men. The first guy was about my size, but built like a wardrobe with wide shoulders and bulging muscles, wearing some fur and a single sword at his hip. The second was much taller, had even more muscle, either that or they were more evident, since he didn't wear a shirt, had a huge shield at his back with a mace by his hip. The last man looked like a classic rogue, thin, and with only a long dagger as a weapon, but holding several pouches by his hip. Yo Boars, this the newbie you were telling us about? Asked the first guy with his hands at his hip. Yep, this is Roland Sinclair. Roland, that's Mord Latro, the party leader. Boars pushed me away from him and waved. Well, I'm done here, good luck. So you're the newbie the bossman was telling us about, huh? Mord looked me over with a critical eye, then snorted. I suppose if you're not fighting it could work, but we're not waiting for you if we have to run. Looking at my out of shape and slightly overweight body I blushed, causing the three of them to burst out laughing. The skinny guy shook his head and waved me over. Ha, don't worry kid, we weren't like this when we started too. Anyway, I'm Scott Olds, and that's Guy Lindia over there. Yeah, now hear how this is gonna work, Mord told me with a serious expression. We're not going much deeper, only to the 19th floor, and we'll avoid the more dangerous monsters. Our goal is to hunt battle boars for boar meat, so things are gonna get heavy for you. Just stay out of our way and try not to lag too far behind. If we find a monster party, drop everything and run away, understand? Understood, I nodded, quite happy with the instructions even if I'd prefer a lighter load than meat. At least the party leader seemed more or less competent. My initial load turned out to be an extra bag with potions and antidotes, a few meters of rope, some rations, 3 thick spears, an extra sword and mace, and 2 sets of extra throwing knives for Scott in case they were needed, leaving the adventurers with as little extra weight as possible so they could fight better. We left Rivera behind us and made our way towards one of the walls while making some small talk. So, how did you turn up down here alone anyway, newbie? Did your party die on the way down? Shut up, Mord, what if that really happened, chided Scott. He's an adventurer, if he can't take it, he shouldn't even be in the dungeon, the man boasted, and it's not like one can't make a living outside Orario. My cousin is only level 1, and he lives quite comfortable. I hear he only has to fight monsters once a month in his city. No, I didn't lose my team, I told them, and thought about it a little before deciding to play along with Villy's idea. It was as good an explanation as any. My familia played a prank on me. They dumped me down here on the safe floor while recovering from a night of drinking. Assholes, Mord said, and the other two nodded before he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. If you put on some muscle you can come find me later. Ogma is a great god. Thanks. Soon we arrived at a huge uneven hole in the ground where I could see the lower floor almost 30 meters down. Alright guys, you know what to do. Guile goes first and secures the landing while the newbie jumps last. Then they proceeded to make their way down the edges of the hole, taking care not to slip on the rocks until they stood 10 meters from the ground floor and just let themselves drop down. I followed them as best as I could, then looked at the party, searching for enemies down on the ground and towards the walls. Shit, that's a long drop. Taking as much care as I could, I found some holes at the edge of the wall and lowered myself, letting my body dangle down in the air. Glancing down again, I gulped and let myself drop. The ground hit me hard, sending a jolt of pain up my knees and forcing me to bend them until I lost footing and fell on my ass, but it was nowhere near as painful as I thought it would be. Shit, I didn't think I could make this jump before without breaking some bones. Giving me a hand, Guile pulled me to my feet before pulling out his mace and started to walk in front of our little party. The 19th floor was filled with strange trees, and everything around was made from wood covered in a glowing blue moss or green foliage, making it hard to see too far away from our location and leaving large shadows growing towards the ceiling. Suddenly my eyes caught movement to our right and, before I could shout a warning, Mord turned towards the right and swung his sword in a devastating downward blow, cleaving a centipede-like monster in two, and all hell broke loose. From above us in the trees a dozen clawed centipedes started revealing themselves. Their carapaces had acted as camouflage, but now they pounced down on us with two sickle-like from legs. Guile lifted his shield and baited the first four aside with a mighty swing, before smashing another against a tree with his mace. Mord acted like a brute, swinging his sword with all his strength, but not completely without skill, parring a blow aside before cleaving a second monster's head and dodging yet a third one. Of the three, Scott was the most skilled. His reflexes were top-notch as he pulled two daggers and threw, then lodging the projectiles on the pouncing centipedes' unprotected bellies, causing them to screech like mad. Then he jumped up and kicked a monster towards Guile and bounced off a tree to slam on top of another, pinning it down against the tree with his dagger between the joint of its carapace. My eyes caught it all at the same time, but my reaction felt slow and heavy. I barely managed to pull out my sword and block two sickles from piercing my head. The monster released a screech in my face and used its superior strength to push me down to my knees and slowly overcome my arm's resistance until one of the sickles drew blood from my cheek. Gritting my teeth, I released a scream and put as much strength as I could manage to push the beast to the left while throwing my body to the right. The roll dislodged most of the extra weapons I carried at my back, but allowed me to survive. Acting on instinct, I slashed at the beast only for my sword to bounce of its carapace and almost fall off my numb hands as the impact left them trembling. My eyes caught the second monster attacking me, but it was just too fast. With my arms still a little numb, I couldn't block the blow and barely managed to dodge one of its sickles before the second one hit me right in the heart. The armor managed to save my life, but it drove all the air out of my lungs and sent me thumbing through the ground, thankfully away from any of the attackers. The distance gave me just enough time to recover my breath and get back on my feet, even if my chest was still hurting like hell. Coughing a couple of times, I looked at the two giant insects coming towards me, their black eyes glinting and sharp mandibles clicking in eagerness at an easy meal. Shit, I could die here. I could really die, and not the immediate painless death of my previous life, but I could actually get eaten alive piece by piece. Breathing hard, I stopped being stupid, stopped trying to copy my companions or study the beasts, and focused entirely on what was important: surviving against a monster who completely beat me in status. A kind of calm state fell over me as my eyes focused on the monster's movements and my mind started working overtime. In the few seconds I had, I did my best to regain my breath and come up with a plan of action. After that single exchange, I knew there was no way I was gonna kill any of the creatures by myself. They were so far above my level, it wasn't even a contest, but at least they weren't so fast as to become blurs to my new eyes. My heart started beating harder against my chest as excitement filled me and I moved. Running to the left, I put the monsters behind each other so that they would come one at a time and observed them as close as I could. My body couldn't compete with their speed, but my eyes caught their every movement, noticing the second one of the beasts lifted its front from the ground and attacked. Twisting aside, I parried one of its sickles trying to slash at me and kicked its head away from me, causing it to lose balance and smash into a tree. Then I rolled under the second beast's pounce as it smashed the wood on the ground. I still wasn't fast enough and one of its blades nicked my leg, leaving a gash the size of my hand, but I managed to get at the creature's back and turned away to run back towards my party. Not my best decision, since the beast swung its body back, bludgeoning me with its carapace and sending me flying before twisting around and spewing liquid towards me. Covering my head, I did my best to let the liquid fall on the backpack while desperately trying to find the second beast. Thankfully, it had gotten its sickles stuck to a tree and was still trying to pull it out. Turning back to the immediate treat, I moved the second I saw its attack start and managed to parry another two sickle blows aside before my hands became too numb from the sheer strength of them and the monster managed to beat the sword out of them with the third hit. Then it flew forward to bite me, opening its mouth wide. I knew I was done. It was just too fast. The throwing knife flew over my shoulder and buried itself deep in the monster mouth, causing it to hear back in pain and splashing me with greeniture. Then Mord was there, cutting of the creature's head with a single blow before kicking the second so hard it was flattened against the tree it had been stuck into. He took the time to get his sword point between its carapace and pierced it until it stopped moving. Good job keeping two of the things occupied, newbie, but try to stay a little closer next time. As I stood there breathing hard, Mord cleaned his sword on a piece of cloth tied to his waist and snorted, "Come on, get harvesting already, we don't have all day." Still recovering from the scare, I took a few seconds to regain my breath before slowly lifting my hand to my face and wiping the itcher away from my mouth. Strange, why was I smiling? I took one last glance around before grabbing my sword and looking it over. It didn't have any itcher, so I put it at my back and straightened myself. Fuck, so that's the difference between a level 1 and level 2. Level 2, what are you talking about? Those things are all level 1. Mord kicked a centipede over rolling on its back. Sure, they're a little strong, but nowhere near a level 2 monster. If we find a group of those, we're running away. Shit, taking a few more breaths, I managed to find the smaller dagger Boars had lent me and pull it out before looking at the centipede. Shit, where's the magic stone in this one again? The chest, newbie, it's always the chest. Right, shit, taking the first magic stone out was complicated and took me nearly a minute of cutting at the thing's belly, but it became much easier after that, and in a few seconds, I had 13 magic stones and 2 centipede carapaces on my bag. Mord saying there was no sense leaving drops, even if they weren't what we were waiting for, and the carapaces were light enough. Things weren't so hard after that. We didn't get ambushed by any more large groups, and Scott managed to find most other mobs before they were even close, allowing Guile to tank them much easier, to the point I only had to defend myself when a firebird showed up and tried to fry me from range. Thankfully my eyes noticed the gathering of mana. Acting fast, I managed to hide behind a tree when the bird washed my location with a breath of fire in the shape of an arrow, and Scott managed to snipe its wing with a throwing knife. He lost the knife, but we got 3 fire feathers in exchange. Once we had to hide from a group of 4 bugbears, giant bears capable of walking on 2 legs and far too agile for their large bodies, but the party had some herbs to mask our scent, and our scout saw them from far enough away. We had time to hide. We still stayed in place for almost 10 minutes after they passed us just to make sure before Mord patted me on the shoulder. Lucky you. We'd probably get away, but no way could you outrun those things if we got into a fight. Then we finally made our way outside the forest, and I saw a large stretch of land with wooden corridors running all over the place, forming cliffs covered in glowing blue moss, and a large carpet of hip-high grass. Without the trees to block vision, we were immediately noticed by a group of 7 lizardmen wielding metallic flowers. 4 of them had long spears made from rose stalks, their blades a sharp red rosebud, while another 2 had large wooden clubs, and the last one had a blooming flower as a shield and a large sword. After a second of hesitation, the lizardman with a shield released a loud roar, and they all charged us in a mad rush. Scott threw a few daggers at him, but the lizard blocked them all with ease, so he changed targets and managed to hit the eye of a spear wielder, causing it to stumble and slow the others down, giving our tank time to get ready. When they were very close, Guile hid his head behind his shield and released a countercharge, exploding into movement so fast even my eyes couldn't keep up. He smashed straight into one of them like a bowling ball, while sending 2 others sprawling. The blow so hard he broke the one he had aimed for, leaving it twitching into the ground. Mord dashed ahead of the group and engaged the shield wielder in single combat, while Scott finished off one of the fallen lizards before they could recover and engaged another dancing around its stabs. He used the dagger to parry the spear, letting it pass his side before grabbing the shaft and getting in close with the beast. The lizard dropped the spear and attempted to bite him, but it was too late, his dagger piercing right through the beast's neck. Guile started trading blows with a club-wielding lizard when the last one managed to flank him. Remembering everything I had seen from both blade wielders, I pulled my sword out of my back and corrected my grip, then used Scott's footwork to dash across the field and release a devastating downward slash on the lizard's lifted arm. The blow was perfect, cutting deep into the lizard's biceps to the point I felt its bones breaking, but not cutting all the way through. The beast reacted faster than I thought possible, twisting around to claw at me and yanking my sword out of my hands. With a sore wrist, I avoided a new scar by millimeters as I kicked away from the lizard and found 2 of Scott's throwing daggers on my belt. My sharingan had watched a man throw the things more than 100 times by now, so I let instinct take over, not thinking about my actions. Swinging both arms, the daggers flew towards the irate lizard, one of them hitting it in the snout and bouncing away as I didn't have enough strength to pierce its hide, but the other pierced its eye, causing it to thrash and scream in pain, then start running away. Hey! I screamed, seeing my sword still stuck on its arm. Thankfully Guile had managed to finish his opponent, dropping his shield. The nearly knocked man dashed after the beast and pounced, using both hands. He swung his mace and pulverized the lizard's knee, actually sending its leg flying, then caving its head in when it fell down. Grabbing the dead lizard by its remaining leg, Guile happily waved at me and dragged the corpse through the grass, leaving a large train of blood behind him. Then he grabbed the sword and pulled it loose before throwing it to me. Thanks for the save, newbie. Careful with your weapon, it's from average materials, but well made. Thanks. Putting the sword away, I picked my knife and started digging for the magic stone. Cutting it in humanoid's chest left me with a queasy feeling in my stomach. They were a little too close to humans for my liking, but I ignored it, and by the 3rd one it barely affected me. Turning to the resting Guile by my side, I asked, are we after battle boars anyway? If we want money, wouldn't any monster do? Usually yeah, the barbarian said and spilled some cold water over his head to refresh himself, but with the Goliath holding up the way for the last 2 days, Rivera is bound to run out of food soon, and battle boars are one of the few beasts to drop meat. Hey newbie, less stalking, more harvesting. screamed Mord from the shade of a tree while Scott kept an eye out for new threats. Come on, I could do a better job. Asshole, I cursed again, but I was already starting to get the impression the bastard just liked messing with people. Don't mind the boss, he's a softie inside, Guile confessed while I gathered a few lizardman's nails that had dropped and kept them in the bag. Come on, our goal is just ahead. Another 2 lizardmen parties ladder and we reached our target, a large wooden cliff wall with a dozen ropes hanging from it. Before reaching the top, there were 2 small huts hanging halfway off the cliff like birds' nests with large spikes in a circular position protecting the base. The spikes were made from tree trunks and positioned with just enough space between them for a human to pass comfortably. Some of the spikes were rotted, and one had fallen down and started to be decomposed by the blue moss, while vines were trying to claim the suspended houses, with the wall itself seeming to eat at the structures. Yeah, it seems we're gonna have to tell boars to put some new spikes in. Come on newbie, get cutting, Mord shouted, and all 4 of us started to clear the place of vines and check that everything was alright. Damn dungeon keeps trying to fix the terrain, so boars has to fix things every week of 2, but monster farms like this are how the city is still standing. I could see it, despite the decrepit look the location had been giving me. I could see how 3 to 5 people could hold this location against a lot of monsters if there were not too many flying ones. Aren't the firebirds a problem? All wood on the 19th floor is fire resistance, and we treat the covers making them almost impossible to burn, so as long as we kill the birds fast they aren't a threat, Scott answered. Well, Guile and Mord picked the spears from my pack, laying one of the ground at their backs, and hold one each. Then Scott shouted from one of the houses, come on kid, climb in. Pulling myself up with one of the ropes, I used my dagger to clear the vines from the second house and saw the wall was really eating the little building, slowly dragging the structure inside itself. It'd probably take another month, but the house would eventually be consumed by the wooden cliff. Inside the house was a small bag with 2 small potions and a large crossbow with a lot of bolts spread on the floor. Some of them were even engulfed by the wall already. Gathering the mess of ammunition, I pilled them all against the window and turned towards my companion, watching him load the crossbow just by pulling its string. Shaking my head, I lowered the crossbow and used my entire body to arm it, not wanting to tire myself out trying to imitate the level 2. Everything ready, boss? Ready? Mord shouted back while stretching his arm, and I watched as he pulled one of his pouches off his belt and threw it behind the 2 warriors. It immediately started smoking, and soon after I started hearing roars. Aha, here they come. Turning my head towards the horizon, my increased vision soon caught sight of the monsters. They were spread out and in small groups, but there were a lot of them running our way. At least 40 lizardmen were leading the charge, but they soon got outpaced by a group of large bugbears and at least 20 battle boars. The swines were almost 2 meters tall with tusks the size of swords and must have weighed almost a ton. Then came the centipedes and other insects. The dragonflies made it to our spot first, large and with long bodies only a little smaller than a man. There were 10 of them, and they started pelting our position, making Guile raise his shield for protection. Scott immediately started sniping them down, taking out 2 of the things before they even noticed, but I didn't feel comfortable wasting ammunition on the things since they were too thin and agile. Then the first bolt of fire hit his position, making him duck down as 3 firebirds took turns bombarding his position. Lifting my own crossbow, I aimed at one of the birds flying lazily in the air and shoot, hitting it squarely in the chest, my sharingan making the feat easy. The other 2 birds scattered, and, while I took my time reloading, Scott took out a second and another 2 dragonflies. I missed the second shoot since every enemy had started flying as fast as it could, but at least they had started focusing on us, allowing the 2 on the ground to focus on receiving the first charge. Battle boars and bugbears reached first, their large and fast bodies punishing the ground when a battle boar got one of its legs stuck in a hole and flipped. I could hear the sound of its leg breaking even a kilometer away, and then a bugbear hit his fallen body, sending them both sprawling. Another 5 of the large monsters fell in the small holes, while 2 bugbears actually got impaled in large spike traps on the ground. The wooden spikes weren't enough to immediately kill the muscled beasts, but they were quickly stomped to death by those behind them. The first bugbear to reach the circle tried to jump over the spikes, but chose one of the better ones, and it didn't snap under the beast's weight. The monster was stuck there trying to climb up long enough that I just took my time and used my third shoot to pierce one of its large eyes, the crossbow having enough strength to drive the bolt right into its brain. The spike circle funneled the beasts right to the only opening being guarded by the 2 warriors, and they braced themselves, receiving the first 2 battle boars right on their spears and killing the monsters instantly. Picking their bodies away, they had time to receive a second charge, killing another bugbear and wounding a battle boar before one of their spears snapped and they had to retreat a little. Mord picked up the second spear, and the fight truly started as the warriors fought to keep too many monsters from entering the protected circle. Scott finally took out the last firebird, and I actually managed to clip a dragonfly's wing, causing it to fall down on top of some monster. The first centipede started arriving and climbing over the larger beasts to get to the humans inside, forcing Guile to exchange his own spear for the mace and keep the bugs away while his party leader killed the larger monsters. With only a few dragonflies still alive, I had the time to look at the wave of monsters. There were still quite a few bugbears trying to destroy the spikes and having some success with the more deteriorated ones, but without the room for a charge, the battle boars were less than effective. Unfortunately, the lizards had started arriving now and they could fit between spikes if they could get through the rest of the monsters. Deciding to experiment, I concentrated into one of the more effective bugbears and tried to send it an illusion of a human by his side. Casting lesser illusion took a little effort and I felt some energy leave me, but was kind of instinctive. Unfortunately, I saw no effect. I also saw no fluctuation on the thing's magic with my eyes. I was concentrating on the beast for almost 40 seconds when I finished arming my crossbow and shot it in the neck, not killing it, but wounding it enough that other beasts forced it away. Then I saw another bugbear looking at me, its face filled with rage, and changed tactics. Meeting its eyes, I cast major visual illusion, instead feeling a large drain on my magic and having to grab the edge of the window to steady myself. I made the thing see and smell every monster around itself as a human. The effect was instant. I saw some of my mana entering the beast's body from its eyes and almost infecting it before it went absolutely feral, killing 3 bugs and even caving another bugbear's head in before the other monsters noticed and turned against it. Scott was mostly ignoring the 4 remaining dragonflies now and instead aiming for the lizardmen squeezing through the spikes and keeping them from succeeding. Monsters and bug corpses were starting to act as obstacles to the lizardmen, and a few were even killed by mistake by the larger monsters. Noticing how effective my little sharingan trick had been, I started looking for another beast to trick, catching the eyes of another bugbear and a wounded battle boar. The result was impressive, even if it left me panting in exhaustion. The first bugbear had just been killed when the second one went insane. As for the battle boar, it had been forced back and allowed to retreat, building space to gather a strong charge, so even wounded it came back moving at 60 kilometers per hour. Using its tusks, it gored the first bugbear it hit, while simply stomping on 6 lizardmen and a few bugs, continuing to attack everything in a straight line until it was stopped by the sheer amount of corpses in its way. Then it proceeded to stomp or try to gore anything that came even close. Stumbling away, I put my back against the wall and cradled my head, almost falling down from the headache. I could feel myself being just short of a mind down. Shit, I had gotten cocky and almost fucked up. Pushing myself away from the wall, I grabbed my discarded crossbow and tried to arm it again, but my arms were shaking from the effort. I didn't even notice my own sharingans had deactivated, so when a blur flew through the window and hit me in the leg with a shot, I was caught completely by surprise and released a scream of pain. Looking at my tight, I saw the dragonfly's projectile piercing me almost all the way through and nearly pulled it out before remembering blood loss was a thing. With some effort and a lot of gritted teeth, I managed to ignore the pain and load another bolt before looking at the fight bellow. Without my sharingan for help, I could barely make out what was happening in the confusion, so I just aimed at the massive monsters and shoot, hoping to hit something. Then another dragonfly almost took my head off and I just ducked down. A minute later, I remembered the small bag of potions and found the health one. Pulling the projectile off, I splashed the potion on my tight and saw it knitting back together at enormous speed. A few minutes later, I was completely healed and the noise from fighting had disappeared. "Hey Huff, you alive there, newbie?" came Mord's voice from below, so I gathered myself and answered. "More or less." Noticing my headache getting better and my sharingan reactivating, I released a breath of relief. Had to use a potion. "Hey, what can you do? They're cheap ones anyways. Come down here, time to get harvesting." With a sigh, I managed to push myself back on my feet to see Mord posing above the body of a large bugbear and giving a roar of triumph. "Take that, you overgrown rug, who's your boss now, huh?" Scott just palmed his face while Guile was sitting down and laughing loudly, covering a large claw mark on his chest with bandages. Using one of the remaining ropes hanging from the safe house, I lowered myself back to the ground and looked around at the massacre. Blood painted the floor completely red, and there were literal piles of monster corpses where they had tried to climb over each other to get to the warriors. Seeing as nobody else was moving, I pulled my dagger and resigned myself to harvesting everything by myself. Still a little shaken, I had to ask, shit, wasn't this too dangerous? Nah, it was a little harder than usual, but that's just because some of the things went berserk, and Mord took the opportunity to save some valor, Scott told me with a smile, while I ripped a magic stone from a crushed centipede. Finishing the easier monsters, I gathered the dropped items in a spot without bloodricher and approached my first bugbear. Getting to the muscular beast's magic stone was a pain in the ass, leaving me elbow deep in its gut. Thank the gods the monsters dissolved into dust after I took the stone away, making my job easier with each one I finished. "What do you mean?" This isn't the first time we do this, newbie Mord bragged, then kicked the body of a lizardman away and cleaned a spot for himself to sit. We must have done this 100 times before we dared even try with only 3 people. 115, Scott corrected, then we did it another 5 times with an extra party looking over to save our asses in case we messed up. Yeah, that seems about right. Pass me the water, Guile grabbing the bag of water. Mord took a long drink and sighed in happiness. Sure, Rivera lost some adventurers when it first started doing this, but we got it down to a routine. Looking around, I couldn't see how the warriors would have survived without my illusions driving monsters insane. The lizardmen or centipedes would have eventually gotten into the clearing and overcome them with numbers. Releasing a laugh, Mord decided to explain, you don't really think we usually fight everything here, do you? Let me tell you, newbie, the secret to surviving the dungeon is to work smarter, not harder. You saw how the battle boars and bugbears were the first to arrive and block the patch for the others, right? Yeah, they were pretty disorganized. Well, this won't work on the deeper floors, but here we just have to survive long enough to get the biggest amount of monsters in a small area. Then Scott there start throwing 2 or 3 magic bombs to kill most of them. After that we just have to finish off the stragglers. Groups with a powerful mage have it even easier, since they can chant without interruption inside the safe house. Turning towards the rogue, I saw him patting one of his larger pouches at his waist. Thinking about what I had seen, I nodded. Yeah, I could see it working. The larger monsters get funneled into a smaller area, trying to get to the warriors, while the smaller ones are forced to climb over or squeeze between them. When they were as concentrated as the party could manage, someone just blows them all up. Worst case scenario, the explosions buy us enough time to climb the ropes to safety, nodded Guile, while pointing at the cliff with his thumb. Wouldn't that be a little too easy? I questioned. From what I remembered, adventurers only gained levels when they went through challenges. Well, not easy. It took a lot of training, Mort told me, and grabbed a piece of ration. Newbie, let me tell you a secret. Not everything has to be about gaining levels. Sometimes it's alright to just make a living. Sure, I'd get more Excelia if I was constantly putting my life at risk, but the thing with taking risks is that sometimes they don't pay off, and if it's your life on the line. Yep, said Scott, sitting beside his party members and taking the water from Mord's hand. They say Orario is the city of adventurers, but a better name would be the city of the corpses. For every sword princess or king, there are tens of thousands who die. Continuing to harvest crystals and drops, I spent the next hour and a half just slashing open monsters and watching them decompose into dust. When I was finally done, my arms were aching and my back was killing me from having to lean over so many corpses, but we had 3 pouches full of magic stones, a nice pile of smaller monster drops, and almost 70 kilos of boar meat. It would have to be washed and cooked at the town, but would feed us for a few days. Great, that should be enough. We're going back before it gets too dark, Mord told the group as I finished putting everything inside the giant backpack. Carrying everything was hard and left me huffing and puffing to the point I had to concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other or risk falling down, but, surprisingly, I made it all the way, the bonus from being a level 1 being impressive. Thankfully we only got into another 2 small fights, and I didn't have to engage, since the dungeon hadn't spawned things back yet. We reached the town when the lights were almost gone, and the party decided to celebrate the delve in the pub, but I was just too tired, my entire body was aching, and my back was killing me. I didn't even know how I hadn't fallen down yet, so I just handed the entire haul of drops to boars for safekeeping and distribution. Handed the magic stone pouches to Mord and ignored everything else until I saw a bed in front of me, then I fell on top of it and passed out. Chapter 2. Getting up from bed the next day turned out to be a harder feat than expected. Not only had I slept in my gear, my muscles were also aching and rigid from an entire day of activity. For someone who had spent most of the previous year without physical activity, even the increase in physique from my fauna wasn't enough to heal completely in only a single night. With a groan of pain, I managed to push myself away from the bed, my entire body stiff like an old man's, and sat down at the wooden chair, slowly moving my muscles to heat them up. I started thinking about my first dungeon dive, the danger, the heavy smell of blood, the different monsters and flora. I couldn't help myself, I started to laugh. This was what I had been missing. This was the kind of thing I had always wanted to do. Well, I could do with less pain, but it was a small price to pay. Pulling the mirror I had borrowed yesterday, I let a drop of blood from my finger fall on my back and used it to read my new fauna. Roland Sinclair, level 1 strength, I11 endurance, I8 dexterity, I12 agility, I13 magic, I55 skills. Chosen of an outer god. Manjikyu Sharingan, Shisui. It was a fairly large growth for a single day of work. I had no delusions that I could match Belle's rate of growth, so the large increase must have come from surviving the 19th floor and several level 2 monsters on my first try. Taking some time to recover, I slowly walked down the stairs towards the ground floor with a newfound resolution. No more conforming myself to other expectations. I'd been given a new lease on life, time to live it as I want. I said after each step and glared at the snickering Villy looking up at me. I never had an impressive glare in my previous life, but glowing red eyes were great for intimidation. I had just sat down in front of Billy when Mord poked his head on the door and smirked at my rigid body. "There you are, come on." He waved me over with a bag filled with coins. Releasing another groan, I swore in my mind, couldn't the damn guy have waited a little to show up? Grabbing at my chair, I sighed and pushed myself back up. Come on, stop being a Mord called from outside. Gritting my teeth, I increased my pace as my muscles finally started to come loose from my movements. Getting out of the building, I almost jumped as a trunk-like arm wrapped itself around my neck and pulled me closer. "Hurry up, newbie, drinks are on me," Mord said at my ear, forcing me to try and push the bastard away from my face. With another groan at the physical strain, the asshole didn't even budge. The hell, why the sudden generosity? It's not every day we make such a killing, newbie. He laughed and let me finally break free from his arm, starting to lead me towards the only pub in the town. Not having to use the magic bombs let us earn far more than usual. "How much?" "For you?" "About 9,000 valis." He threw a little pouch at my chest, which I almost didn't catch. "For us, almost a week of work in the upper floors." At least I can pay for my stay until someone kills the damn Goliath," I said, and let the man lead me inside the pub. The place was almost empty so early in the day, but Scott and Guile were already seated on a table with 2 extra mugs of beer. Don't worry, if someone doesn't kill it in about a week, Boars will probably form a party to hunt it down," Scott said from the table. "He just doesn't want to have to pay people to do it." "Yep, that's Boars alright, always looking out for number one." Mord laughed and sat down. I took a little more time before I managed to lower myself to the chair and take a swing of the beer. It was terrible. "Ugh, what is this shit?" I asked when I managed to swallow the horrible thing. "It is shit," Scott said with a perfectly serious face, then burst out laughing when I spit it out on the floor and tried to wipe my mouth clean. "Just kidding, we all know it tastes terrible, but with the path to the surface cut off, the pub can't resupply, so people start getting creative." Looking at the ale in my hand, I frowned. "Ugh, do I want to know where this comes from?" "No, you really don't," Guile told me with a resigned voice before taking another swing of the mystery liquid. I continued to look at the thing at my hand with suspicious. It didn't exactly taste like piss, but it was close. "What the hell, it's free, I'll drink it anyway." Taking another swing to the cheers of my companions, I swallowed and stretched my back before asking, "So why have I received so little coin?" "What, you expected equal share?" Mord mocked, then started enumerating things on his fingers. "First we had to pay Boars for using his monster farm, then we had to pay for the supplies and everything we used, then Boars take a share from the remaining, and then you get your 10%. Well, you also had to pay Boars his finder's fee, and for lending you gear." "So," said Scott with a laugh, "in Rivera, the elder always wins." All 3 of them lifted their mugs and sighed at the same time. "Greedy bastard. Why don't you just use the spot?" "Several reasons really, want some meat?" Mord told me and flagged a servant over to order breakfast when I shook my head. "First, someone has to maintain the farming spots, and Boars make you pay 10 times. If he finds out you used it without his say-so, then a lot of the gear we used, especially the monster bait, isn't exactly legal, so it's hard to acquire. Plus it's expensive," Scott added with a sigh. "Well, Mord ordered some bread. Boars gives us all the equipment we need and takes his cut when we return. In the off chance we don't break even, he takes the loss instead of us." "Ugh," I said and finished my beer. "I guess that's fair." "Do you think Boars is gonna send us out again?" asked Guile with his mouth full when the breakfast finally arrived. "Well, probably one other time. His usual adventure parties are stuck on the middle floors, so he doesn't have many options," Mord said, and released a huge belch before slamming his mug on the table. Getting stuck here may turn out to be very lucky for us." "So, you guys still need a supporter?" I asked, knowing that even with my eyes, I wouldn't survive an encounter with even a single monster on the 19th floor, much less the large groups we often meet. "What the hell, sure, you weren't a complete waste of space like our last 2 supporters." Throwing some valis on the table, Mord laid back and relaxed. "We're planning on a shorter delve later after lunch. You can tag along for the usual 10% if you want." Finishing my bread with eggs, I nodded my head, not like I was gonna miss another chance to grow and watch level 2 adventurers to steal their moves, plus I hadn't had that much fun in ever. Leaving the pub with the 3 of them, I asked, "Is there a place to wash myself here?" "Take the town's northern exit. There's a small lake there that's not too close to any of the entrances to the 19th floor, so it's mostly safe," Scott pointed out to me. Tying my new fortune to my weights, I thanked them and followed the directions. When I woke up I hadn't noticed, but after sweating so much while fighting and sleeping in my clothes, I had started to smell. Looking around as I walked, I saw dozens of adventurers walking around with a variety of gear from full plate to barely any clothes. Most were humans, but there were a few palom and animal people all around, all of them looking annoyed, and some even fighting on the streets. Thankfully I managed to sneak away without grabbing any attention. Outside the small town there were quite a few people guarding or putting up tents to wait for the Goliath to be slain. In truth there was nothing stopping people from trying to sneak through the monster wrecks or run away from it, but most didn't want to risk it, as Mordred explained yesterday while hunting. The beast wasn't the fastest, but had enough power that a single bad hit could kill a fleeing level 2 adventurer, so people who could afford it preferred to wait. I reached the small lake to see there were nobody around, so I spent 15 minutes making sure there weren't any monsters close by, before taking off my clothes and washing myself as best as I could without soap. I managed to get myself clean and get rid of most of the blood on my gear, before another party joined me making me hurry up, since I didn't trust the others to keep their hands away from my gear. Wearing wet but clean clothes I started exploring the safe floor, making sure to keep an eye out for anything I couldn't handle. The dungeon really was a marvel. This floor's ceiling must have been at least half a kilometer high, and the colorful glowing crystals made for a relaxing atmosphere, almost making me forget how dangerous this place was. Thankfully movement at the edge of my vision quickly snapped me out of it, and I ducked as a stone hatchet flew over my head to bury itself on a tree. With a loud squeal, a large bipedal rabbit with red eyes tried to headbutt me with its small horns. On pure reflex, I managed to kick the little bastard away and took some distance until it recovered. Twisting my head I smiled. The bloodthirsty little thing looked really cute as it crouched down and grabbed at the ground, then pulled a second stone axe and puffing itself up to appear more threatening. "You know what, you'll make for a great test subject," I told the monster as it tried to hack at my leg. From what I remembered from the show, Elmridge were somewhat weak level 1 monsters, and my eyes gave me a huge advantage over the beast, even if it was a little faster than me. Pulling out the hard sheet of my sword, I waited for the little beast to attack again before dodging aside and delivering a strong blow against its side, sending it tumbling away. The little guy recovered fast. Grabbing its axe, it used its powerful legs to jump at me, preparing for an overhead swing. Lifting my weapon, I tried to block the blow with a single hand, but it had far more strength than I thought possible, blowing right through my block and making me desperately jump back to avoid getting hacked in half. My heart beating hard against my chest at the excitement, I started to smile. It seems the beast was a middle floor monster after all. Reading myself for a fight, I narrowed my eyes at the rabbit. I swore it was sneering at me for getting pushed back while pulling a second stone axe from the ground to hold in his left hand. "Why, you little you know what, why the hell am I even fighting you right now?" Staring at its smug little eyes, I quickly compassed an illusion and then took a few steps back to watch its effects. With an angry squeak, the rabbit attacked the ground where I had been standing, then took a large leap away before releasing a gasp of pain and dropping his right axe. Looking around himself in confusion, the Elmridge moved its intact arm before grabbing its weapon back and screeching in anger, its red eyes shining with rage at me before it launched the axe. It was far enough away that I managed to sidestep without problem. My second illusion was better compassed. In it I charged the rabbit and completely ignored any attack before grabbing it by the face and smashing it into the ground. I used the pain from getting smashed by the centipede as a base for the monster, and it was much more effective than just hitting it with a stick, leaving it keening on the ground. I had to confess, watching a monster angrily swinging at empty air before falling to the ground by itself was amusing, but the lament of pain made me feel bad for the little thing. The monster took long enough to recover that I looked around and, seeing no other adventure, decided to start testing things out with my illusions. I didn't pull out the Manjikyu so I wouldn't risk my eyesight, but there were plenty of things to test with illusions before I could really use them in a fight. Good thing too, since it turns out using illusions was hard, much harder than it seemed in Naruto. Creating an illusion didn't happen instantly, like when I had watched an anime. No, I had to be able to picture in my mind what I wanted to project as perfectly as I could, and anything I wasn't able to imagine was missing from the illusion, making it easier to break out of. Projecting a single static picture for a few seconds was easy and barely took any effort or mind. I could make the Elmridge see me standing around him without moving for hours, but a more intelligent opponent would easily see through the illusion and ignore it. Another thing to note was that the more senses I tried to fool, the harder it became. Creating visual illusions was made extremely easy by my sharingan, since I was able to perfectly remember anything I had seen, but the second I tried to project something I hadn't seen, or worse, affect scent, hearing and tact, it became 1,000 times harder and more expensive. Creating the best and longest illusion I could, I made the little rabbit start running in circles after a screaming copy of me. Hitting the copy would feel like hitting a wall, and it smelled mostly like me. Then I stopped to consider, yeah, I could make a stupid monster confused and helpless, but another adventurer would never fall for it. Despite my best efforts, I had failed to consider a lot of things: the effect of wind on the clothes, some of the shades, the way my clothes looked from the back which I hadn't seen with the sharingan, the footprints I left in my path, how I'd sweat after running so much. There were thousands of little mistakes which could give the game away against a more cunning being. Thankfully it seemed I could train my illusions. The more I tried to project something the faster and better I could do it, not because of the simple repetition, but because I could remember it better, correct things that were missing as if I were creating a picture inside my mind, and every time I remembered it, I could put on a little more detail, make it a little closer to reality. It seems like big and fantastical illusions could work very well on monsters, but I'd have to rely more on subterfuge against human opponents. Taking out my sword I walked towards the tired rabbit, who had finally given up on following my illusion. I sent it a vision of the dungeon without me in it, so, although the beast turned around when it heard me approach and started sniffing at the air in confusion, it remained in place as I grabbed my sword with both hands and split its head in half with an overhead swing. Cleaning my blade I pocketed its crystal and sighed. My head was already aching from using too much mind, and I'd have to support Mord's party in another 2 hours, so I just went back to the town. Hey newbie. Good work yesterday. Boris waved at me as I was entering the town. By his side was a Redeed Amazonas in real-life bikini armor. Thank you Rob for giving me the sharingan so I may never forget this view. I mean, the adventurer women I had already seen in Rivera were hot, but they were mostly wearing full armor, so I hadn't been able to truly enjoy the view. The woman had the body of a fitness model and an extremely cute face. She had a six-pack together with visible muscles in her arms and legs, but was still completely feminine, without the bulk of a bodybuilder. Yep, that confirms it. The gods were perverts and fauna actively made people hotter. Damn, I used to live in a tropical country, so I wasn't exactly a stranger to women wearing very little clothes, but I had never seen anyone with a better body even on TV. Boris seemed to almost be trying to escape from the Amazon as he quickly finished his talk and hurried over to me. He kept glancing over his shoulder until the woman left the town completely and only then relaxed, throwing himself on my shoulders and almost causing me to fall. Phew. How I hate first-class adventurers, he said with a tired voice, always wanting discounts, and I can't even pressure them. I facepalmed at his sheer shamelessness before curiosity got the best of me and I started to talk. So, who was she? Boris raised an eyebrow at me. Ah, look at you, barely an adventurer and already trying to pick up women. I'm so proud. He mocked. Farna's too much for you though, she's the vice captain of the Ganesha Familia. They're bringing up a strong beast and wanted to know the Goliath situation. He finally allowed me to push his large body away and ride it himself before smiling widely. I managed to get them to kill the damn thing and even pay for support from our strongest adventurers. You think I can hitch a hide to the surface? Probably. Hell, Ganesha is the god of the masses, so they may even do it for free if you don't piss them off. He slapped my back twice and smirked. Anyways, congratulations newbie, you didn't die. Good job. Mord said. You did alright. You're just happy cause you got your 30%, I accused and had to dodge another painful slap to the back as Boris smirked. I can't really deny that's part of it, the large man said. Well, we walked back towards the center of the little town, so wanna watch the Goliath fight? Since you saved me from that harpy, I can find someone to protect you for only 5,000. Fuck off. I gave him the middle finger, but he just messed up my hair and walked away, probably to try and scam someone else. A nap later and my mind was mostly recovered. My muscles were back to giving me trouble though, so I waited for Mord's party at the town's entrance while stretching and moving my limbs to try and get rid of their rigidness. I waved Guile over when I caught sight of him carrying a large backpack, and soon all three of them were waiting for me to put everything on my back and start walking again. I was thinking about ways to maximize my illusion's effects when I noticed we weren't on the same patch. Hey, aren't we going the wrong way? Nope, we're going to the 19th floor the proper way this time. The shortcut we took yesterday was great to reach Boar's farm, but if we aren't after that it has too much risk of getting us caught in a monster party, explained Scott by my side. The skinny man seemed to be the tactician of the party. Hatch, said Mord without warning, and I almost missed a small, square leather bag he threw my way. Opening it, I saw 2 small red vials and 4 green ones nested safely between some kind of foam. The green ones are weak antidotes, yesterday we avoided them, but the 19th floor is full of poisonous things, so it's better that everyone has at least 4 of those things before going down. Thanks. Oh, you're giving those back when we return, don't worry about that newbie, he said, and we finally reached the entrance to the next floor, a huge cave leading down illuminated by a mixture of crystals and moss. Midway down we faced a bugbear and, later, a mad beetle. The beetle was the first single monster to give the party some trouble, mainly because the tunnel wasn't large and the creature had an extremely hard carapace. I kept my distance since I could barely see the movement of its arms even with my eyes. Scott finally had to take one of the spears and pierce its magic crystal when Mord got a deep slash to his tight. At least the thing dropped an antenna as a consolation prize. The entrance to the large tree labyrinth looked like a jungle for giants. Roots taller than me spread through the wooden floor, and massive trees climbed towards the ceiling, with limbs spread over our heads in twisting paths so large they could easily support a battle boar on top of them, and everything illuminated by the strange moss, leaving almost no shadows anywhere. Our first encounter was a group of lizardmen, 6 of them without weapons charged at us jumping over a root, but, without defenses or weapons they were easily picked off, 3 falling to Guile's daggers before even reaching us and the rest getting cut down or clubbed to death by Mord and Guile. I can't say I'll ever get used to the sight of smashed brains all over the floor when harvesting the lizardmen, but I did manage not to throw up, and, I guess it did incentivize me to work faster so they would dissolve into dust. The man-sized firebirds were harder to take down, but we only found one that Guile had to lure down, while Scott and Mort climbed trees to ambush it. Together the party had to take some large detours to avoid any bright-colored or too large flower, unwilling to risk getting poisoned, but we were all forced to drink antidotes after dozens of small bipedal mushrooms burst out of the ground all around us. Thankfully the little nuisances were very weak level 1 monsters, and even I managed to kill them with ease, but we all grew more and more sluggish with every one killed, our blows losing strength until, by the end of the fight, I couldn't hold my own weapon and was barely keeping myself up with Scott and Guile only a little better. Thankfully no other monster attacked at the same time, and we all recovered after taking the antidote and waiting 10 minutes, wrapping some clothes over my face. I put on some gloves and harvested their crystals while trying to hold my breath, and it either worked or they were no longer releasing poison because I didn't have to use another dose. A few hours later I noticed I had started to see faint shadows over the movements of the lizardmen and centipedes, by far the most common monsters we fought. "Hey Mord, can I try to fight one of the lizards next time?" I suddenly asked as I was harvesting another bugbear, this one pretty badly hurt since Mord and Guile had gone to town on it after it had thrown Scott at a tree and made him pass out. "You sure? They're far weaker than minotaurs, but they're still considered a level 2 monster you know." "Yeah, but that's because of the weapons isn't it? They don't seem as fast as the other level 2 I have seen," I told him, unable to mask the eagerness in my voice. "If one shows up without weapons again, can I fight him?" "You know what, sure, try and not lose a limb or something, and you should have made enough to buy a better healing potion," he said as I tied up another full pouch to my bag and got up from the bugbear's dust. "Scott, can you spot the little madman?" "Sure, I'm fast enough to keep him from dying immediately." Seeing all 3 of them agree I smiled. "Thanks, I have been watching them and think I can handle one if I don't have to worry about other things." Then we heard the screaming. We looked at each other for a second before everyone turned to Mord. A second scream of pain started and didn't stop as some unlucky adventurer started to suffer. Mord swallowed before meeting each of our eyes and sighing. "Alright, we're gonna check it out, but safely. If it's a monster party or an irregular we're not gonna be able to help you understand." When I nodded he motioned for Scott to scout ahead while we followed as fast as we could without making much noise with me copying their movements. Walking beside Guile we traded amused glances as we both were able to hear Mord's soft grumbling voice. "Goddamn it, my soft heart, you don't run towards the screaming, Mord, never run towards the screaming." Nearly a minute later the screaming stopped and I heard a loud roar of rage take its place, almost causing me to stumble. The closer we came to our target, the more we started to hear of the struggle as something large smashed against the trees, then Scott dropped from a tree near Mord and we all stopped. "Get the fucking spears out, we're fighting it," he told everyone and hurried towards me as I took of my bag and took out his bow before stringing it. "What is it?" Mord asked as he dropped any extra weight he held and readied himself. "The Viver." Another loud roar with a distinctly feminine tone rattled the trees around us and sent a shiver down my spine. Chapter 3. Again, this is a repost from Space Battles. You can find 13 chapters there in Scrubblehubber for free on my dot. "Shit," said Mord as he lost all color on his face. "Shit, can we take it? It's wounded and some of the previous party fighting it may still be alive," Scott told us while tying a quiver to his waist and pulling out a stamina potion. "Should," Mord cursed again before downing his own stamina potion. "We can't let this chance pass by." "What's a Viver?" "A draconic female monster, like a lamia from the middle floors but much bigger and stronger," Mord explained while everyone got ready. "Thing is it's really fucking rare and always has a lot of drops. If we kill it, we can earn enough for half a year of work. It's also really fucking strong like the infant dragon on the upper floors," warned Scott while patting my shoulder. Looking at the 3 of them I only saw small valleys in place of their eyes. There was no stopping it now. Considering my options I dropped everything I was carrying and sighed. At every encounter we had I had been training my illusions, so I was almost out of mind to cast and I wouldn't make it back without them. "Any of you guys have a mind potion?" "I have one," said Guile. "It's from that annoying mage we partied with 2 months ago. I just never got rid of it." "Ha. I knew the fights were a little too easy," Mord said in triumph. "You got some kind of daze or confuse spell you've been chanting." "I can create crude illusions," I confessed a little of what I could do while taking the small blue vial from Guile's hand and downing it in a single gulp. "It's much harder to use against stronger monsters and works best when there are more than one, but I can probably make it miss some blows or leave itself open a couple of times." "Will it work on this monster?" "Fuck if I know, I could use it on the bugbears," I shrugged. Fine, try to create openings for us if you can, but we won't be counting on it, Mord said before taking a deep breath. Alright, we're gonna try and get the jump on this thing. Kid, stay away from the fighting and watch out for other monsters. Scott, keep your distance and harass with arrows. If Guile and I die, just run and try to get the kid back to Rivera. Alright. Sure boss. Scott light and squeezed his bow harder, making the wood creak. We approached the Viver's location as carefully as we could, using one of Scott's scent masking herbs and making sure to avoid stepping on anything to cause noise. Thankfully there weren't any dried leaves or twigs in the ground and we made good time before we crouched under a root and I got my first look of the draconic monster. It was large, larger than a bugbear by far. Mord was right when he said the thing was like a lamia. It had a large reptilian tail, but it was much thicker than those depicted in stories, looking heavy and with a round ending. The woman part had bluish skin with hard brown scales covering its privates. A large pair of wings sprouted from its back with massive thin claws at the end of muscular arms too large for its body. Its hair was long and it had needle-like fangs all over its mouth. It was also covered in blood and eating the flesh of a dismembered woman. I was frozen as I stared at the towering beast. It must have ripped off the woman's limbs where her body had fallen and then attacked the torso itself, because there were trails of blood in 4 directions. Entrails were pulled out and spread over the moss on the floor. Then the beast had broken her ribs and pulled them open like a door to get access to the heart and lungs that it was currently chewing on. Another man was pinned by the stomach to a root by what must have been his own spear, his arms and legs flapping bonelessly as some of his intestines were hanging out of his belly, the trails of blood telling me he had tried to struggle to pull himself free before dying. A third man had his legs cut off and was laying face down a few meters away, with yet a fourth laying against another root with blood all over its clothes. I crouched there and my eyes took it all in, every speck of blood and gore. Every piece of this horror hit me like a punch to the stomach, and I'd never be able to forget it for the rest of my life. No wonder the Uchiha went mad. Taking my time to register everything around the large beast, I managed to keep myself from throwing up and spent almost a full minute just trying to hear and see everything about the situation. Almost trembling from just the presence of the beast, I knew I couldn't afford to take it easy. I activated the Manjikyu, immediately feeling a aching sensation in my eyes and, unable to catch its eyes, threw the best lesser illusion I could at the beast, showing it the location as it was, then nodded towards Guile. The large man stood slowly, making as little noise as he could and released a very slow, very deliberate sigh of relief when the Viver didn't react. We had planned it before arriving. I'd mask you and try to mask their noise. I wasn't sure I could do scent as well, so I prefer to focus on the other two and allow both melee fighters to get a devastating first blow against the Dragonkin. Well, it didn't know they were there. Thankfully the beast was already relaxed enough after the fight that the illusion took hold. Mord and Guile made their way towards the beast, Guile in front with his shield and spear at the ready. Once they had to freeze as the Viver smelled them on the air and lifted its head to look around, but, not seeing anything, the creature dismissed its concerns and continued to eat. From his place up on a branch, Scott pulled out an arrow and started testing if he could get a good enough footing to draw it. The branch was wide enough. He soon found a comfortable position and waited while both warriors flanked the beast and prepared their blows. Unsheathing my sword and crouching between some roots where I could still keep an eye on the beast, I watched as Mord and Guile took their positions, one in the front and another at the creature's back, then stabbed with their spears, aiming for the monster's crystal to end the fight early. Mord's spear pierced all the way through the Viver's torso, but somehow missed her crystal. The beast reacted with serpentine reflex, twisting away, Guile's spear leaving a deep gash on its chest, but failing to pierce it. With a loud roar of pain, it whipped its tail around and hit Guile's shield, sending the man stumbling back while striking blindly behind itself, forcing Mord to retreat. Then it lifted its head and opened its wings wide, releasing another roar of rage so loud I had to cover my ears. I felt my illusion break as the beast's magic was roused and tried to send another one, something hastily put together that would only leave static copies of adventurers I had seen laying around the beast, hopefully confusing it a little, but it didn't take hold, the Viver in too much pain and rage to be fooled by a lesser illusion. Guile threw his spear like a javelin, but the beast batted it aside with an arm and took the time to break the shaft of the one piercing its body, pull it out and throw it away. Then it reeled away with a screech of pain as an arrow sprouted from its left eye. Mord and Guile didn't waste the chance. They struck as one more jumping up to try and get to the beast's head, while Guile delivered a powerful blow to its chest, caving in some of the creature's scales. The beast twisted around with a wide sweep of its arm, and Mord was forced to block with his sword or be disemboweled by its claws. A second arrow nicked its neck and it roared again, its wings retracting to protect its head before its eyes focused on Guile, and it was all the warrior could do to survive the fury of blows it released. Claw swipes dug deep, gashed in Guile's shield, forcing the man to retreat, while the beast kept Mord away with tail strikes, which hit the ground with so much strength it sent wood flying like shrapnel. Another 2 arrows hit it in the chest and tail, but the Viver just ignored them and continued its assault. I kept trying to catch it in another illusion, but it was too strong for me, and I was left feeling useless as the group fought for its life. Mord finally managed to dodge the creature's tail and, blocking the shrapnel from reaching his face with an arm, delivered a deep cut to the Viver's waist. The beast twisted around once again, delivering a devastating tail strike against Guile's shield and sending him flying through the air. Ducking under another arrow, the female Dragunkin focused on Mord and delivered strike after strike, even as blood flew everywhere from the deep gash on her waist. Mord was overwhelmed, with only his sword he wasn't able to fully block its claws and was scratched again and again, making his armor look more like rags and leaving his arms trembling from the strain. In desperation he took a claw swipe to the chest armor in order to focus fully on a new strike. With a scream he delivered a full-powered chop towards the beast's limbs, somehow managing to sever both of them just below the elbow. The creature was beyond caring thought and just struck like a snake, biting down on his neck and riding him to the ground. Scott frantically shot arrow after arrow, but the beast curled her tail around Mord like a snake and let the arrows pierce her strong muscular coils while she savaged Mord's neck. Looking around, I noticed Guile finally getting up, but his shield arm was hanging limply by his side and he had clearly hurt his leg since he was limping as fast as he could towards the two fighters. Crap, he won't make it. I didn't even notice I had spoken out loud. I was afraid, no, terrified. Our party was losing and, although the Viver was deeply hurt, it still seemed strong enough to finish off Guile and face Scott alone. I knew what I should do now. There was no shame in retreating from an enemy vastly more powerful than myself. We had even discussed it. Guile was too hurt to escape, so he would draw the monster's attention and Scott and I would escape to live another day. Fuck, I knew Scott wasn't gonna abandon them of his own accord, but if I ran first he may follow. I could be saving his life even. Even if he didn't follow me, I could be careful and use my illusions well enough to have a chance of making it up to the 18th floor, certainly more of a chance than if I faced a powerful monster as a level 1 with all my attributes below 3 digits. The hell, for all I knew those guys could have been planning to kill me after dealing with a Viver to avoid paying my 10%. We only had a professional relationship where they were paying for me to act as a supporter. It's not like we were a permanent party, and the money from such big haul could be enough for them to turn against me. I even vaguely remember Mord acting like an asshole towards Belle on the danmachi, and I'm, with trembling legs and my heart threatening to burst out of my chest from fear, I ran. My first throwing dagger hit the Viver on the shoulder and the second dug into its neck as I circled the beast to get a better angle. It wasn't enough to get it to release the limp form of Mord from its coils, but its remaining eye glared my way as the beast took another bite of the man. The sheer amount of rage there, seeing the boiling hate on its eye, I knew even visual contact enhanced by the Mangekyo wouldn't be enough to affect it, so, more or less on instinct, I activated my trump card, Kodamatsukami. In an instant I felt myself being drawn into its eye, felt myself fall into an abyss of darkness, only sometimes illuminated by scenes of blood and carnage. The only feelings this creature felt were rage and a very muted amount of pain. It didn't even take pleasure on its kills, not really. Grasping at its consciousness, I desperately tried to find a way to influence it, to change the rage it felt. Every time I tried, a wave of red-hot hate washed over my work, tainting it back into incoherent bestial madness. There was something controlling the beast, a sinister influence permeating its mind and filling it with the irrational desire to eliminate every intruder. Feeling a mind down coming and knowing Mord didn't have enough life left on him for me to take my time, I flailed around desperately. Wielding my power more like a hammer than the delicate instrument it was supposed to be, I felt something give. The influence inside its mind snapped, breaking the connection it had with the creature, but the backlash disrupted my technique and I didn't have enough mind to fight back. In desperation, my only thoughts to shift the beast's attention from its current prey, I managed to send it 2 imperatives, the first telling it that Mord wasn't important and the second that I was. I came back to myself with a scream of pain. I had the worst headache of my life and I felt like my right eye was about to explode as a flood of blood ran down my face, but it worked. The draconic woman released Mord's body and lifted itself up to stretch its wings. Locking another arrow with the stump of an arm, the beast found me standing there and narrowed its eye. Oh crap, I said as I cursed myself for my stupidity. Why the hell didn't I just make it ignore me too? The beast would then have turned towards Guile or Scott, both of which are far more likely to survive its attacks, but knew I had to be the hero, and now I was gonna get murdered by a half-dead monster. Stumbling once from the pain, I managed to get my feet under me and ran towards Guile's discarded spear as the Viver released another roar that shook me to my core and charged. Dropping my sword, I ran as if my life depended on it. I ran with everything I had, expecting the creature to bite me in half with every step I took. I reached the spear and slid down on the moss, grabbing for its shaft. Turning around, I briefly registered Scott's body tumbling away from the monster holding one of its amputated wings. Making sure I planted the butt of the spear on the ground, like I had seen the warriors do yesterday, I braced myself to receive the beast's charge. Unfortunately a Viver was not a boar, seeing the spear pointed its way the monster twisted aside flowing around the spear with ease, only the fact my manjekyo were open saved me as I managed to follow its lightning fast movements. Releasing the spear I cried out and tried to protect my head and neck with my arms. It hit me like a truck, its hook-like fangs biting down on my forearm and crushing my bones, before its body slammed into me and drove my back into the ground for several meters, then it trashed its head, wrenching my arm out of its sockets and lifting my feet off the ground and slamming me back down, driving the air out of my lungs. Opening its mouth the beast released my arm only to bite into my shoulders, sending another wave of pain through my body. I screamed in fear and, with a desperate drive to survive, I managed to grab its face with my left hand. The beast ignored me until I dug my thumb into its eye sockets. Screeching in pain the Viver pulled its face away from me before striking blindly at my arm, biting off my pinky and ring finger together with some of my hand. It pulled its head back to finish me off. Opening its mouth impossibly wide to show a row of bloody fangs the Viver reared back for a new strike. Looking at it, I saw my death bearing down on me in slow motion. The large mace hit it on the side of the head with all the strength Guile's arms could muster, sending the creature's entire body away from me. Releasing a whimper of relief I managed to turn my head enough to see the Viver's serpentine body twisting uselessly at the ground. Even blind and with half its head caved in the monster still seemed to be trying to get to me until Guile laid a boot at its back and used his mace to pulverize its head against the wooden floor, ending it once and for all. Laying there on the floor with a pool of blood starting to spread from my wounds, I could only stare at the dead monster, the tip of its tail still twitching about before I burst out laughing. I had survived, despite the incredible stupidity of what I had done I survived, then the adrenaline started leaving my system, and the pain hit me. Sucking in a breath I dared look down at my shoulder to see a large piece of it just missing with bite marks left on my exposed bone. I couldn't move my arm, and was barely hanging on to my consciousness as the pain continued to increase. I wanted nothing more than to give up and pass out. The only thing keeping my eyes open was the fear I wouldn't wake up if I did so. I focused my sight on Guile and watched as he released his mace and walked towards me. "Stupid kid, ha ha," he said as he approached me, his shoulders dropping from exhaustion. "Should have ran." I'm telling myself the same thing, I confessed. Kneeling down beside me, Guile took out several vials from the pouch at his side and opened the first, pouring it down on top of my shoulder. My muscles contracted as the potion felt like alcohol being thrown on my exposed wound, but the bleeding immediately stopped. Throwing the vial away he opened another and poured it at my arm with the same result. "Ugh, so tell me Dr. Huff, will I live?" I tried to joke, but it came out with far too much truth to be funny. I had lost a lot of blood. "It's not gonna be pretty, and you're gonna have to see a specialist to fix this mess on Orario. But you're gonna make it," the large man said, still trying to recover his breath. "Hopefully we're all gonna make enough that we won't be in debt after this." I'll help me drink a third potion vial. I felt my wounds all close, leaving me with an odd tingling sensation over them. So, of course the headache from overusing my eyes came back in full, and even the potions couldn't stop the bleeding from my right eye. Turning my head away from Guile, I closed both eyes to see if the pain would go down, but it was no use. For a few minutes I laid there breathing hard while Guile ripped my shirt and used it to wrap my arm against my body. Then he got up and kicked my leg lightly. "Come on, get up, we don't want to tempt the dungeon into sending a monster party after us." Remembering the place I was laying on was actually a semi-sentient thing hellbent on killing me, I opened my eyes wide and pushed myself up as fast as I could. It was not a good idea, as Guile had to hold me up until the world stopped spinning and I regained my footing. Note to self, blood loss and exhaustion did not allow for fast movement. Finally managing to look at my surroundings, I saw that Mord was actually alive, if in an even worse situation than me. He was sitting against a tree, pale like a corpse and with a chunk of his neck missing and one of his legs bent into an odd angle, while his armor had to be discarded, his shirt absolutely soaked with blood. Surprisingly, there was an elf laying beside him with a pair of amputated legs by his side. The male wasn't awake, but his chest was moving and his stumps were already healed. Finally I found Scott forcing a potion down the throat of the elf woman leaning against a root as she tried to wave him away to check on her remaining companions. She didn't seem ready for a fight as she constantly missed his hands or fell back down as if drunk. He finally lifted her in a princess carry and laid her back down beside her companion before coming to stand with Guile and me. "So they were alive after all," Guile commented as Scott came closer. "What's up with them?" "They're Loki familia." It was their leader's first time leading them on the lower floors, and as far as I could find out from the girl, they had shitty luck, Scott explained before turning to me and looking over my limp arm. "You alright? Think you can continue walking?" "I won't be fighting anything, but I think I can make it back to the town if we stop to rest once or twice." I gave him my best guess. It wasn't the time to act proud since our lives were still on the line. But Goody trailed off while looking towards our wounded. All three of them didn't look like they were gonna be walking anytime soon. Alright Guile, you carry Mord. I think I can carry the crippled elf without much trouble. And you newbie, watch the girl. She hit her head, but is mostly alright. You just have to keep her awake and walking. You sure? Asked Guile with a lifted eyebrow. Shit, I don't want to just leave them here. A man. Scott sighed and covered his face with his hands, while releasing a long sight look. If we travel carefully, the both of us should have enough time to lay them down and kill any monster we can't avoid. But if things look bad, we abandon the elves and ran for it. Alright. Without a better idea, we both nodded and got into action. Chapter 4. Truth be told, we weren't exactly ready to make our way back to Rivera, but we had to at least get away from the clearing where we fought. I still wasn't thinking clearly, but I managed to get one of the elf's arms over my shoulder and, with Scott guiding me, hobbled away from the blood-filled clearing. We must have made for a sorry lot, Guile and Scott carrying two cripples like backpacks while I and my elf companion stumbled around like a couple of drunks. I must have lost some time then because, next thing I knew, Scott was guiding me into a spot between tree roots where Mord and the elf male were already laid down. It was a collection of roots from different trees that had twisted around each other and then dug into the wooden floor before spreading apart, leaving a hollow spot between them almost like an underground cave. My companion just mumbled incoherently as I guided her path towards our temporary resting place. With another groan, she collapsed against the root, her eyes unfocused. Laying against the wood of the ground, I wasn't much better. My head was still killing me, my right eye was aching, and I was having trouble breathing. Shit, I wasn't certain I could focus enough to fight at 10 years old, much less cast illusions, and my shoulder was still dislocated. The bites on my arm and shoulder were also starting to hurt again, despite the healing potions having closed the wounds. You alright there? Asked Scott as he crouched over my body and looked at my wounds. Perfect, I lied, then stared at my limp arm. Can't you at least put my arm back in place? Well, I can try if you really want me to. He looked over my arm again and shook his head. I don't recommend it really, even if I do it right and don't make it worse, your arm is still broken. Cheap potions aren't that effective. Ugh, I groaned and considered it, but decided not to take the risk. Fine, you wouldn't have another mind potion you were hiding at least? No, never needed it. He patted me on the leg and got up to check on Guile, who was breathing hard and massaging his wounded leg. Laying my good arm over my eyes, I tried to take deep breaths and relax my muscles to alleviate the pain. It wasn't all that effective. I hadn't really noticed before, what with the life or death situation and the tension of just getting away from that clearing, but I was utterly exhausted. My body felt like I had just ran a marathon. Every muscle was aching and complaining after each breath. A few seconds later, I just passed out. Mord was the one who woke me up. He did so by throwing a roll of bandages on my face, making me jerk upward, jolting my wounded arm, and causing my head to explode with pain once again. Puke. I groaned as I cradled my head with my good hand and tried not to throw up. Shit, sorry newbie, came Mord's weak voice with at least some amount of regret. Taking another couple of deep breaths, I finally managed to open a single eye and glare at the pale party leader. He didn't look good. Pieces of his neck and shoulder were still missing, and he was pale like a corpse. Mord seemed barely awake, his body resting against a tree and his eyes struggling to focus on me, so I decided to drop it. Taking stock of the situation, I noticed some itcher from a centipede at the entrance of our little resting place, and the fact that Guile and Scott were nowhere to be seen. My heart skipped a beat for a second, causing me to hold my breath, but I saw most of their gear laying against the tree at Mord's side, with the Viver's drops poking out from inside the bag. At least they hadn't abandoned us. What happened? Mord finally asked while trying to focus enough to look at my wounds. His voice was extremely worried despite the sheer exhaustion. Where's everyone else? We killed the thing, I answered before registering what he was really asking about and smiling. Everyone is alive. Thank fuck. Hug. Always knew greed would do me in. Either that was enough to satisfy his curiosity, or Mord was just too tired to continue talking because he let his head hang down on his chest and closed his eyes. Damn bastard, going right back to sleep after waking me up. I continued to look around. The elf woman was also missing from the cave, but her companion was left laying at another corner, wrapped in a cape, his chest slowly moving up and down with his breathing. I snorted in amusement. Legless, the elf was still alive it seemed. Pushing myself fully into a sitting position, I finally wiped the blood from under my right eye. Trying to open it caused me a lot of pain, so I grabbed for Mord's thrown bandages and wrapped them around my head until it was completely covered. I tried to send some power into my eyes. The left eye was working alright, but I felt some kind of blockage against my right one. Some instinctual understanding told me I wouldn't be able to activate the Manjikyu on that eye for at least a few days, and the Kodomatsukami seemed to be permanently beyond it now. Fuck, not even a week into this world and one of my greatest strengths was already gone. Why the fuck didn't I let Scott handle the Viver? He'd probably be only a few seconds slower than me at reaching the beast anyway. Searching my own backpack I found another stamina potion and drank it down before gathering my courage to stand up. Even with the medicine my body still felt heavy with exhaustion. The temptation to lay down and take a proper nap was strong, but I just knew something worse would turn up if I closed my eyes again, probably a wild floor boss or something. I just had that kind of luck. Another few minutes and I had finally recovered enough to push myself up, even if I had to use the tree as support. Making sure I still had a few throwing knives in my pants, I grabbed one of the extra spears and used it like a cane to walk towards the entrance. Looking outside I saw the moss on the floor was covered with spilled blood and ichor in various spots, but there were no corpses or any signs of the rest of the party. Lowering my head I walked through the entrance as carefully as I could manage, only relaxing when I saw Scott, Guile and the elf woman sitting around a small fire, some kind of large plant burning on top of it. Holding onto my spear cane tightly I made my way towards the three of them. "What's going on? Hey, you're awake?" greeted Scott while the other two just nodded. "Come sit." A few more steps, some loud groaning and some amount of pain later I was sitting beside Guile while the large man slowly threw yellow leaves inside the fire. "Why are we just sitting here again?" "Salis and your party leader need rest," answered the elf woman, speaking for the first time. She looked both embarrassed and annoyed. Looking at her eyes I saw a small amount of distaste for all three of us in her face. "Damn, I forgot elves were kinda racist here. This is Remilia," introduced Scott while fanning the flames. "She has some medical training and was able to help Mord and her own companion, but we have to let them rest while the potions work or risk them dying. It's the least any adventurer should know when delving," she mumbled while stealing a glance towards the root cave and biting down on her nails. "We should give them another hour at least." "Excuse us if we're not from a first-class familia," Guile grumbled and threw another leaf. A sudden noise to the right caused me to jump up, my spear held tightly. The sudden movement gave me a bout of vertigo, and I almost fell down as my vision went white. A second later I managed to refocus and see all three of my companions relax and sit back down. Looking towards the noise I saw an arm-sized branch laying on the floor, signs of blunt force damage where it had broken from the tree. "Ha, even burning so much monster repellent, we're all still jumping in fear like rookies," Scott mocked and received a venomous glare from Remilia. "If you haven't noticed, we had to fight at least 3 times since we stopped," the elf comments while finally releasing her weapon, a short and thin sword. "Come on, sit back down." Roland Guile pulled at my clothes and I relaxed, letting him help me sit down. "Alright, what's the plan now?" I finally asked after a minute of silence. Scott looked at the elf, but she didn't even open her eyes to acknowledge the question, so he shrugged and answered. "We guard the cave for another hour or so before Mord and the elf can take another dose of healing," he said while poking at the fire with the tip of one of his long knives. "With me and Remilia back in fighting shape and Guile protecting the wounded, our chances are much better." Scott didn't seem to be lying, so I sighed in relief and felt a weight I didn't know I was carrying lift from my shoulders. I had a sudden impulse to laugh out loud, but looking at the stern figure of the elf sitting straight like High Roller, I decided to hold myself back. I doubt she'd appreciate my good humor after losing most of her party. "Here," said Guile as he threw me a water pouch and some kind of meat ration. "You better eat something before we make for the village." Thanks, and nodded his way and bit into the thing. It had the texture of rubber and tasted even worse. I made a face at ugly thing, but after the first bite hit my stomach, I finally noticed just how hungry I was, so I forced myself to continue eating before washing it all down with big gulps of water. "Don't worry, newbie, getting to Rivera we're gonna feast like kings." Scott leaned towards me and patted my shoulder while laughing at my distress. "We've got the full loot from a Viver and the gratitude of the Loki familia, we're set for hay." The rogue was fast enough to jump back as I almost spewed water all over his face. My face had gone white and I had to force myself to release my spear once again. Cough cough. "Which familia did you just say? Do you have a problem with the Loki familia supporter?" asked the elven woman while looking to see if any water had hit her armor with disgust in her face. "Nope, no problem at all." I quickly denied just to be certain. "You're talking about Norse god Loki, right, son of Odin?" "I don't know what the Norse are, but Loki-sama is one of Odin's daughters." "Yes," the elf answered, looking at me suspiciously. I was hoping that wasn't the case. Damn, I knew it would be impossible to not get involved with some god or another, but did it have to be one of the worst ones out there? I mean, I had only watched danmachi up to season 2, so I knew very little about the Loki familia, besides the fact they were strong and had ace, but if they aren't some kind of evil mastermind last boss, I would eat my shoe. On their head was Loki, shapeshifter god of lies and fire. The guy, or girl here I guess, was the father-mother of the worst monsters in Norse mythology and the one to cause Ragnarok. No way she wasn't planning to destroy Orario behind everyone's back or worse. Noticing all three of my companions were now giving me odd looks, I gave them my best innocent smile. "Yeah, when you guys go talk to the Loki familia for a reward, can you, maybe, not mention my name?" "Why?" asked the elf, hey eyes narrowed into tiny slits. Before I could answer, Scott jumped up from his sitting position, sending us all into alert. "Who's there?" "Oh, thank God, a distraction." Everyone went quiet for a few seconds as we waited for an answer or a monster to rush in. The silence lasted long enough that I was about to try and change the conversation when the answer finally came. "Well, what do we have here?" said an arrogant voice from between the trees. It seemed to be slightly disappointed. I briefly let myself relax when everyone turned away from me, then I noticed the way they had all straightened and were holding on to their weapons and swallowed hard. Grabbing the shaft of my spear, I took stock of my situation. My head was still pounding and my right arm was useless, but I felt better after eating something, nowhere near fighting shape but mobile at least. From the forest I saw 3 men walking towards us. They were large and built like Guile, massive and filled with muscle, but also wearing thick cloth armor that made them look even bigger. "Greetings," said Scott, getting up and looking up in the trees behind the men searching for something. "We're just taking a rest before making our way back to Rivera. Our friend got hurt early on, so we did not have much luck this delve." Seeing as Guile and Remilia followed Scott's example, I tried my best to get up without showing just how wounded I was. No need to show more weakness than what was already obvious. "Really?" said the one in the center while scratching at a thick beard. "Interesting, because my friend here just heard something about a Viver, a very rare monster, isn't that right?" We all traded glances, then Guile slowly put himself in front of our party, while Scott and Remilia attempted to shield the cave from the newcomer's sight. My heart started beating hard against my chest while Billy rose into my throat. I did not like the way this conversation was going. "Indeed," Guile said slowly, "damn strong too, we barely escaped the thing with our lives." "Yeah, the damn thing almost killed my friend over there before we managed to stun it and ran away." Scott nodded, but his eyes never left the trees and his hand slowly loosened his throwing knives. The 3 newcomers briefly looked at each other and laughed mockingly before the leader focused back on Guile and gave him a smirk. "Somehow I don't believe you." "Shit." Sending a small amount of power into my good eye, I ignored the pain as it hit me and activated the Mangekyo once again. I wouldn't be able to use any believable illusions right now, but the increased visual power and prediction ability would be the only thing allowing me to survive a fight, and even a second distraction was enough to save my life. Fuck, could I kill a human? Monsters were one thing, but I had never gotten into a serious fight before. Spars and play fighting, yes, but I had never thrown a punch and really wanted to hurt somebody. As all 3 men unsheathed their swords and started advancing, Remilia shouted, trying one last time to avoid the fight. "We're from the Loki familia." She cried out and lifted some emblem up into the air with one hand while squeezing a beautiful dagger on the other. "The monster's loot isn't worth that much to us, we can just give it to you, but if you fight us now, the Loki familia will never forgive you." The men paused when the leader lifted a closed fist, his eyes showing amusement. "A good proposal, and what's to stop you from hunting us down anyway after reuniting with your familia?" "I swear in my name as Remilia Forestwind, I and my companions won't even mention your existence," she said, "and I had some hope that we wouldn't have to fight. We don't even know your names." Lifting his large sword to rest on his shoulders, the bearded man laughed out loud. "Well, I do like earning money without doing any of the work after all, why not?" Remilia and I both relaxed when the man's companions lowered their weapons. Getting robbed of our well-earned loot sucked, but it beat getting murdered for it. Everything happened in an instant. The bandit leader went from relaxed and friendly to grinning like a maniac and delivering an all-out strike towards Guile's head at the same instant that Scott kicked my legs out from under me and jumped towards the elf. My fall was sudden and painful. It also saved my life as I felt something sailing right where my neck used to be, the air whistling at its passage. My companions weren't fooled by the man's words and had been ready. Scott had saved Remilia from another 2 arrows by smashing into her with his shoulder, causing both her emblem and dagger to fly away from her hands. At the same time, Guile acted fast. Lifting his arm, he used his shield to receive the blow and struck one of the others. The second man had lowered his guard in order to sell their ruse and would have received a killing blow to the head had Guile been in perfect condition. Unfortunately, his leg was still wounded and had faltered upon receiving the leader's strike. The mace's blow struck the man's shoulder, instead causing him to stumble back with a cry of pain, temporarily taking him out of the fight, but I lost sight of the battle soon after. The 4th bandit rushed in under some kind of camouflage skill, attempting to stab Scott on the back. The bandit seemed almost invisible as his body changed colors with the background, but my improved eyesight caught the minute differences in the air. "Watch out." I screamed at the same time that I lifted my spear and stabbed the center of the bandit. The second I struck, I knew I had made a mistake. A combination of using my non-dominant hand and hesitation at hurting another person made my stab far weaker than it should have been. It pierced the first layer of cloth armor the bandit was wearing, but barely drew blood and got stuck into his gambeson. The short man turned around, almost wrenching the spear out of my hand, and struck at my fallen form, but I was already rolling into my good side, dodging his blow. I'd still have been cut if one of Scott's knives didn't pierce the man's arm, causing him to swear. His skill disrupted and opportunity lost. The man jumped back as Remilia rushed him and delivered a series of slashes with her sword, forcing him to retreat constantly or risk dying. Even the single glance I took of her fight was enough to know the only reason the man survived was that she was still tired and hurt. Her technique was far better than even Scott and Guile together. Finally pushing myself up, I decided she had the rogue well in hand and rushed the 3 warriors in front. Scott and Guile were fighting fiercely, their combined might and my help were enough to reach a stalemate with the bandits. Wounded as I wasn't much better than a distraction in the fight. Even if I had the speed to get past any of the bandits' guard, I didn't have the strength to deliver a telling blow, but I still used my spear's reach to threaten them like an annoying wasp. They may suspect how weak I was, but nobody wanted to risk ignoring me and finding out. Despite the danger, I smiled. Things were going our way and soon Remilia would deal with the rogue and come help us. Those bastards had chosen poorly. Of course, that's when everything went wrong. I felt the impact before I could react, a crossbow bolt hitting my armor with the strength of a sledgehammer piercing its metal and my chest at the same time. I stumbled aside, the pain making me lose sight of the fighting for a few seconds as I stared at the large feathers sprouting from my chest armor with a strange fascination. I had forgotten about the crossbowman. Grabbing at the bolt, my first instinct was to pull it out. I grabbed the shaft and it sent a jolt of pain through my body, snapping me out of my daze and back into the present. What the hell was I doing? Looking around trying to get my bearings, I saw the guy Guile had wounded rushing me, his eyes filled with anger at their failed ambush. With no time to think, I stabbed at his face with my spear, but he parried it aside with his longsword and stepped inside my guard before stomping me, aiming for my wounded arm with a cruel smile. I tried to dodge it, but I was just too slow. The kick hit me with such strength I lost my footing and went flying. With how much pain I was feeling in my arm, I didn't even register falling on the moss-covered floor. I knew I had to move if I wanted to live, but I couldn't. The pain was just too much. Curling up into a fetal position, I threw up on the floor and felt hot tears soak the bandage over my eye. The damn bandit took his sweet time. The fact he wasn't worried about my companions made me even more afraid, and I finally managed to slightly push myself up. Looking around, I saw my spear laying just beyond my grasp and tried to crawl towards it. Putting one foot on my wounded arm, the bandit pushed away from the spear to fall back on my back. "Tenacious little fuck, aren't you?" he mocked before stepping on my chest and pushing me down. Giving a twist of his wounded shoulder, he asked, "Any last words?" I took a deep breath, then I pulled one of my throwing knives from under my pants and stabbed him on the back of the leg as hard as I could. His greaves only protected the front of his legs, so my dagger pierced deep into his flesh. With a scream of pain, the man lifted his foot at the same time as he swung his sword towards my head. I rolled towards his good leg, causing him to completely lose his footing and fall over my own body. "God damn it." The guy screamed as I grabbed at his body to stop him from getting up my leg. "You stabbed my leg, you motherfucker." Ignoring the pain of my broken arm, I hugged the man's arms, desperately trying to stop him from killing me. Fear and leverage, giving me the strength to resist him. Without the room to swing the weapon, he started hitting my head with the pommel again and again. We struggled like that for a few seconds, my face getting covered with blood and sweat. When he pulled his hand back for another hit, I managed to knee him between the legs, causing him to finally drop the sword. With a roar of rage, the bandit grabbed me by the hair and pulled my head away from his armor. My burst of adrenaline-fueled strength had finally run out. I could barely resist as the man rolled us aside, putting my back against the floor and squeezing my neck with both hands. His face a mask of incoherent rage, he leaned in and screamed at me, finally meeting my eye. Bleeding, exhausted, almost completely out of mind and slowly getting the life squeezed out of me, I still smiled as I used greater visual illusion. In an instant, I sent the man an illusion of the only thing I could think about, pain. His roar of rage turned into a whimper, and he released my neck to cradle his arm against his chest. Grabbing a second dagger, I screamed and jammed it up into his neck, then I did it again and again. I continued to scream and stab him in the face, even as he fell on top of me, forgetting everything else but my need to survive. The clap of thunder snapped me out of my stabbing, letting the dagger fall from my numb hands. I tried to wipe the blood away from my face, turning my face aside. I started dry heaving until a second bolt of lightning filled my vision. Following the path of the lightning, I found Remilia on her knees, one hand holding her shoulder where a bolt had pierced her, and a second holding the ornate dagger she had dropped at the beginning of the fight. Another swing of her dagger released a third bolt towards the trees. I watched as she swung the dagger another 2 times before it crumpled to dust in her hand and she collapsed back, apparently spent. Without the strength to even move, I turned my face away from the dead man on top of me and waited to see if one of the bastards had survived to come kill me. After a few minutes, when nothing happened, I managed to gather enough strength to push the body aside and crawl away. "Hey ha, you're alive," Guile said from above, causing me to look up. He looked like crap, his face was covered in cuts, his nose and lips were busted, and it looked like he was gonna lose an eye. Well, his other one was as red as my own. It was already starting to swell up too, making it look twice its usual size. "You cough, you look like crap," I said, too tired to even care. "Thanks, you two." Bending down, the large man grabbed my good arm and pulled me up and onto his back. My legs felt like jelly, and I couldn't find purchase into the floor no matter how much I tried, so I was forced to just let them drag on the floor as he carried me towards the cave. "So he phoned off healing, yo," he said with a swollen lip. "Ran out Pothians out here. Doing my best to keep my wounded arm and the crossbow bolt still sticking out of my body from banging against anything." I didn't say anything. I had nothing to say really. I'll dragged me inside the cave and carefully laid me down on my back. Watching the entrance, I saw Amelia still pressing down on the bolt at her shoulder to stop the bleeding, followed by Scott. This time he hadn't escaped unharmed. He was missing his left arm from just below his shoulder and had tied some cloths around it to stop the bleeding. He also had a large sword gash on his chest. "What happened?" asked Mord, having finally woken up again. "Eve," said Scott, as if that answered everything. "Fuck." Yeah, fuck was about right. Eventually, Amelia bent over me and carefully poked at the bolt on my side. Her own bolt was still stuck on her shoulder, held in place by bandages so it wouldn't shake. "Roland, right?" she asked, but didn't wait for me to answer before looking me over. She cleaned the cuts I had and bandaged them, but left the bolt alone. "We don't have enough potions to heal you if we pull it out, so you're gonna have to take it until we reach Rivera." Okay, I was so tired of this delve I had gone monosyllabic. I just wanted to be done with it as fast as we could. After that I just went numb, losing track of things and barely managing to follow instructions as we made our way back towards the village. I think we stopped to fight the dungeon spawns another 2 times, but I didn't even see which monster it was, my eye refusing to really focus before we finally reached Rivera. The second I caught sight of the entrance filled with adventurers, I felt my body give out. Everything went black. Chapter 5. The beast's needle-like teeth sank into my flesh with incredible ease, biting off my entire arm and swallowing it in a single gulp. With its sharp claws it grabbed me by the shoulder and lifted my body up until I could stare into its glowing red eyes. "Persistent little shit, aren't you?" the beast told me as its claws ripped out my belly, spilling blood all over its shirt. In front of my eyes the creature shifted, its snout retreated, while its claws turned into daggers until all that was left was a large man holding me by the throat and frowning. With a roar of rage the man drove his dagger under my neck once, twice, 3 times, then he smashed me against the ground and continued to stab me over and over and over. I woke up with a scream, my face was covered in sweat, and I was completely out of breath. For a few seconds I searched aimlessly for my phone to see what time it was until I remembered just where I was inside. At least I had woken up. Looking around I noticed I was resting on the floor of a tent. If I squinted my one good eye I could see Rivera from the gap on my tent's opening, letting myself relax once again. I dropped my head back on the pillow and wiped my face with the covers. Taking stock of my situation I saw that my wounded arm was in a cast, I no longer had a crossbow bolt sticking out of me, and my wounded eye was properly bandaged. Even better, my headache was gone, and I felt good. I was also incredibly hungry. Not perfect by all means, my arm was still aching, and my muscles were all protesting any movement I made, but I was well rested and not in immense pain, so it was a huge improvement. But no one came to check on my scream. I sighed, my gear laid beside me, but there was nothing else on my tent and I desperately needed a little food. I managed to push myself into a sitting position, then grabbed the pole in the middle of the tent and pulled myself back on my feet. I didn't even lose balance. Stretching my back I briefly considered looking for a cane, but decided I didn't need it and walked out of the tent on my own 2 feet. My first steps were careful and uncertain, but I quickly gained confidence and was walking normally by the time I stepped outside. It was still night at the 18th floor of the dungeon, but some of the white crystals in the ceiling were already starting to shine down on the city, giving me a great view of the giant tree in the middle of the floor. I was just starting to smile while staring when the desperate face of the man flashed into my mind, filled with fear and pain, as I stabbed his neck with my dagger until there wasn't even blood anymore. Falling to my knees I started dry heaving while trying to banish the image from my mind. In my eyes I could see every drop of sweat on the man's face, every twitch of his flesh as my dagger cut it, the way the blood sprayed out from his veins. My sharingan had recorded it all and made absolutely sure I'd never be able to forget it. I must have stood there for an entire minute before I was able to think straight. The panic and desperation of the memory finally left me and I started to really think about my actions at that time. I had never killed a man, no, I had never even thought I'd have to kill a man before coming here. It was both harder and easier than I had thought. Harder in the sense that I didn't want to do it, my body itself had fought against the action, pulling my blows, making them weaker than I knew was needed, slower too, until I was so desperate to survive that I acted on pure instinct. It was also easier, my dagger punched through his skin with barely any resistance. Humans were far more fragile than even the weakest of monsters, their blood flowed freely from any wound, pumped out by their own beating heart. Regaining control of my body I spit to the side and wiped my mouth with my arm. Slowly my breathing started to return to normal, and I got up before spitting once more to get rid of the foul taste in my mouth. I still felt a little guilty about the act, but it had been a matter of life and death, and, surprisingly, I knew I'd do it all over again if it was needed. I wasn't about to become a mass murderer or something, but, if pressed, I knew I wouldn't hesitate again. I didn't know if that was a good thing or not. I had been raised religiously and, while I had distanced myself from any church after growing up and didn't exactly follow the Bible, I had taken the thou shalt not kill part of it seriously. "Hey, you're up," came Mord's voice from inside another tent, pushing my musings to the side. I turned towards him. Mord wasn't looking great, his shoulder was still wrapped in bandages and he looked white as a ghost, but he was walking around normally and seemed to be in high spirits. "Morning, you're looking happy," I grumbled while grabbing at the sling on my arm. "Why wouldn't I be?" he said and patted me on the back with far less strength than usual. "We survived, newbie. Not only that, but we also made a killing. What more do you want from a delve?" I suppose he was right, pinching the bridge of my nose. I sighed. "Alright, what now?" "Now we make our way to the medical tent. Zenobi said he wanted to see you again after you awoke," he said, and turned me towards a small tent with a red cross in front of it. "The kid's a hard worker, so he should be awake already." "What about you?" I asked, looking him over. He didn't look all that well. "Ah, he already looked me over. Turns out I'm fine, but healing potions aren't the best at treating blood loss." Mord coughed into his hand. "You on the other hand, you've been asleep for 3 days now." We were starting to get worried. "What?" I asked, dumbfounded at the same time as I felt my stomach grumble loudly. "Shit, you think I can eat something first? You know what, I'll leave you with the guy and grab some breakfast for us, alright?" Mord smiled as he guided me towards the medic. "I heard you saved me, thanks. I owe you one." I didn't really think about it, I confessed, embarrassed. I hadn't fought the Viver to save Mord, or at least not only to save Mord. Even now I didn't understand why I had charged a monster like that, but at least I knew being a hero was only a very small part of it. I barely knew Mord, and, while I liked him, we weren't even friends yet, not really. Pushing the tent flaps aside, Mord poked his head inside and shouted, "Hey Zenobi." The newbie finally woke up. "It's Medaka, Mo." "Da. Ka." A frustrated male voice said from inside the tent. "Get him inside them." Being pushed inside the small tent, I saw a short young guy sitting behind a desk. His chest was mostly bare with only a strap over one shoulder holding his shorts up. He had huge bags under his eyes and seemed incredibly tired. "Good luck, I'll find something for us to eat." Mord closed the flap and shouted, already walking away. "So you're the medic?" I asked while lifting an eyebrow. "Not really," Medaka sighed while scratching at his eyes with both hands, "but I'm the closest thing to one down here. Of course they made it my job." Getting up from behind the desk, the guy took out my bandages and looked inside my eyes before checking my arm. "As I said, I'm not really a healer, but your companions wanted me to have a look at you anyway," he told me as he handed me a green potion to drink. "You're gonna have to check with someone up there in Orario, but you seem okay. I'd say you were just suffering from overusing your mind." I see. I drank the potion, a warm feeling filling my throat before both my muscles and my wounded arm stopped aching, scratching at an itch inside my cast. I frowned. Why am I in a cast? Shouldn't potions have dealt with it? "Sure, if you were willing to pay 120,000 valis," he told me while sitting back down. "It's cheaper to just put it in a cast and drink a common potion a day. Should take about 2 weeks to completely heal." It made sense. In the show any potion used had healed just about everything, and yet, potion tiers were still mentioned. There were still elixirs worth millions and other medicines and treatments. "Thanks Medaka," I said when it became clear the man couldn't do all that much. 3 days without eating had left me ravenous, and I was eager to see if Mord had found some food. "What did you just call me?" he asked, almost jumping out of his chair, his eyes shining like stars. "Ah, Medaka," I said while taking a few steps back. The guy looked like he wanted to jump me, and I had no desire to feel his bare chest against me. "Thank you. Thank you." He buried his face against an arm and actually started crying. "You don't know how much this means to me." "Right, you sure you don't need to rest or something?" I suggested. The guy looked exhausted and was clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. No, I need to finish this paperwork for the monsterphilia, but thanks for asking." I gave him a nod and hurried out of the tent to search for some food. Ugh, why can't Farna-sama do those things? It's always me. Back outside I didn't see Mord anywhere. My stomach was rumbling again, so I started walking towards the city. Walking through the camp I saw drawings of an elephant mask everywhere. On the patch to Rivera was a clearing without any tents. Instead there were dozens of steel cages filled with monsters and guarded by adventurers in similar gear to Medaka. Looking at them I recognized a cage with 4 lizardmen and another with a mad beetle, but there were also small green humanoids that were probably goblins, metal rabbits, harpies and even a huge cage with a giant green snake curled up inside it. Passing the cages several of the guards gave me suspicious stares, but I just nodded at them and moved on, too hungry to even watch the beasts. I caught Mord just as he was leaving the inn. He waved me over and I attacked the bag he was holding, devouring everything without even looking while shoving him back inside. There was no way a single bag would be enough. An hour and almost 600 valis later I pushed my chair back finally satisfied. Scott and Guile had turned up for breakfast earlier and thanked me for the help with the Viver, but had already left to pack up their things. Apparently the Ganesha Familia had killed the Goliath yesterday while I was still asleep and the party had managed to convince the Familia to hire them for help leaving the dungeon. Usually Ganesha's adventurers were more than enough for middle and upper floors, but with almost 100 monsters being carried in cages, they needed all the help they could get and Mord's party were mostly competent, even wounded as they were. Good thing I woke up when I did or they'd have to pay for someone to carry me up. Just where did you put it all? Shut up, it's been 3 days alright. I was hungry. I glared at him, even as I tried to adjust my pants so they weren't so tight. Anyway, that's about it. Dorlia is probably gonna want to meet with you before they depart, but we should be back in Orario a little after midnight. Good, I think I need some time to rest and recover before I come back here, I told him. The dungeon was beautiful and all, but I needed some time to deal with everything. Don't we all? At least you'll part of the lot, Mord grumbled angrily before draining the rest of his beer and slamming the mug down. Frustrated he let his head bang against the table. Fucking asshole thieves. What do you mean? Even with all 3 of our savings I don't think we have enough to fix Scott's arm, he confessed with a sigh while waving the bartender for another refill. Can't you guys reattach his arm somehow? Though that's why we were carrying that elf's legs with us. Well, we managed to recover his arm, but with the Goliath still up and Rivera without supplies, there wasn't any potion or healer strong enough down here, and it's too late now. Pushing himself back into a sitting position, Mord scratched at his eyes. Getting something to restore the limb after so long would cost us more than we have ever made, but we can probably get him a prosthetic if we take a loan. Shit, looking at my immobilized arm I thought about my own missing fingers and grimaced. It seems I'm not getting those back anytime soon. What happened with those bastards anyway? Did we get them all? The elf got their leader and one of the snipers with her magic weapon, and Scott managed to kill the other fighter, but at least one of them escaped. He confessed Romilia was sure she had hit one more guy with her last thunderbolt, but the weapon was already crumbling, and we never found a body. Closing my eyes I had to squeeze the edge of the table to keep my hand from trembling. One of the guys who tried to kill me was still alive. A thief and murderer with reason to take revenge on me was still out there. Goddamn poachers, with how many wounded we had we couldn't even risk bringing one of their bodies to find out from which familia they belonged to. There's nothing we can do. Well, if I recognize the guy in the street I'll certainly petition Ogma to deal with him, but those things happen in the dungeon. Finally getting his refill he looked down at his beer for a second before giving a bitter smile. At least Freya, Ganesha and Loki managed to keep things mostly civil in the surface, but down here, all that matters is strength. I gritted my teeth in a sudden bout of impotent anger. It's not that I wanted everyone death for daring to attack me, but the fact that they could just attack someone without provocation and escape without repercussion left a bitter taste in my mouth. Don't worry about it, newbie. Get your share of the money, have some fun. Life's too short to focus on every shitty thing that happens. Pushing his chair back, Mord grabbed his full mug and stretched his back. You know what? I'll even bring you to the entertainment district after you take off that cast. A level 1 fighting a Viver in melee range and surviving. The Amazons are gonna love you there. Can't really say I was against that. I wonder what kind of entertainment a fantasy world would have. Well, I have to finish packing my things. I'll meet you in 2 hours at the entrance to the 17th floor, alright? I waved him away and finished my own beer, the good kind. Now that Rivera could resupply from Orario. Hey Villy, is my room still free? The cat-eared innkeeper looked my way while cleaning a table and nodded. Yeah, with the Goliath down and one of the big familias camping outside, very few people stay here. Why, want to rent it again? Not really, but can I use it for an hour or two? You know what, sure, he told me and was about to continue with his work before he thought of something. But no funny business, you hear me? No leaving suspicious stains all over my room. If I have to clean it after you left I'm blacklisting you. Ugh, now I'm gonna keep imagining white stains everywhere. Entering the room I found the mirror right where I had left it. Closing the door I sat on the bed and lifted my shirt up. It was awkward with my cast, but I eventually managed to expose my back and smear a drop of blood on it. Roland Sinclair level 1, Strength I-72, Endurance I-98, Dexterity I-64, Agility I-58, Magic H-199, Skills, Chosen of an Outer God, Manjikyu Sharingan, Shisui. I felt a warm sensation fill my body as my Felna was updated. Every attribute had a significant improvement, and magic had almost tripled after using my eyes so much. It wasn't really worth the loss of a Kodamatsukami, but at least it took a little bit of the sting off. But the increased attributes I felt even better. The soreness of my body was almost entirely gone, and I felt strong despite having an arm out of commission. No wonder adventurers continued to risk their lives in the dungeon. The feeling of improvement was almost addicting. Hiding my Felna again, I took a deep breath and just tried to relax. There was nothing trying to kill me right now, no danger I had to watch out for, no pressure. I could almost feel the tension leaving my body, but before I knew it, the face of the man I killed flashed in my mind, as detailed as the moment I had killed him. I remembered every pore on his skin, every drop of. Jumping out of the bed, I shook my head and made myself busy creating illusions. Thinking about my experiences, it was clear that every illusion I had created took time and effort to make, but it also got better, more detailed and realistic after each use. I suppose the ninja and Naruto had generations to optimize their genjutsu to make them as complicated as they could and realistic enough to even fool other ninja, but I was starting from scratch. It was the difference between doing complex calculations from scratch and having a known formula for it. The same result could be achieved, but the first would take far more time and effort while being far more likely to make mistakes. At least the sharingan helped me tremendously when casting visual illusions. I started simple. The first illusion in my repertoire would be something I wouldn't even need to think about. I'd simply fill my enemy's vision with darkness, robbing them of sight. Monsters could make do with other senses, and adventurers would quickly realize something was wrong and break the illusion, but it would earn me a few precious seconds of confusion until I could create a better illusion, probably more than enough to finish an opponent. The second illusion served the same goal. I concentrated on the pain I had felt in my fights and made it into an illusion that would last a few seconds. If the Almrage I had killed was any indication, it would be very effective against monsters, and I was sure any adventurer would at least flinch away. Thinking about it, do monsters even feel pain like humans, or was it just muted? Every monster the party had fought on the 19th floor had continued fighting while ignoring any wound they received, but the Almrage had become almost incapacitated when I made it feel pain with an illusion. Interesting. Both illusions didn't really require much preparation or complexity, but it was good to have them ready, to think about them as if they were skills I had access to, instead of having to come up with solutions on the spot. I'd have to train until casting them became an instinctual response in a fight, but, for now, they were good enough. Then I started building my first complicated illusion. Using everything I had seen, I started making something able to fool even an experienced adventurer. Slowly the image started to form in my mind. The illusion would start very simple. I used the mirror to look at myself from every angle until I could replicate the look of my own body perfectly. I included everything I could think of, the sound, the smell, the wind. I put everything I could into a couple of seconds of action. When cast, my enemy wouldn't lose sight of me or anything. Instead, the illusion would start at the exact same spot as me and act exactly as I would. It would be capable of dodging a single attack before striking with an overhead blow with my sword. My own body would be hidden from the target side, so I could act freely while he dealt with my illusion. Hopefully whatever I was fighting would try to block my overhead strike and open up its chest for a quick kill. But I could also use the time to escape, buy myself some space, or just keep an enemy occupied for a few seconds. It took me a little over an hour to make the skill and keep it in my memory. Not bad for something I was doing for the first time, and, coupled with the manjiku, the illusion is good enough to fool even a level 3 adventurer for a few seconds. At least I think it is. Hopefully, I'd have to test it out. I was also pretty sure I could use the experience I gained to create something similar in about half the time now. Unwilling to risk missing the meeting, I grabbed my things and left the inn with a wave towards Villi. It was finally time to enter Orario. Chapter 6. The Ganesha Familia was still getting ready when I arrived at the entrance to the 17th floor. About 60 adventurers were working hard putting monster cages on top of wagons. Giving a brief nod to Guile and Mord, who were busy pushing the mad beetles, I approached Scott, who was resting by a wagon filled with lizardmen and hobgoblins. At least I think they are hobgoblins. Good to see you up. We were beginning to think we'd have to pay for someone to carry you to Orario, said Scott, sounding incredibly tired, his remaining arm holding onto his stump with a tight grip. You sure you don't want to rest another day? I thought I'd need help to get to Orario alive. Well, yes, but there's no need to rush it anymore, he said, and laid a hand on my shoulder. You've got the money from the Viver now, and it's not like we're gonna leave you down here after what you did for Mord. It's fine if you need another day or two of rest. I thought about it. Truth was, I'd have been very tempted to take him up on the offer when I woke up, but after updating my fauna, I was feeling much better, and I wanted to finally see Orario. I'm fine, I said, and immediately felt an irrational amount of guilt. Looking at my trembling hand, I sighed. Well, not completely fine, but my body is good enough. First time killing someone? He guessed while motioning for me to sit beside him on the wagon. First time in a real fight, actually, I confessed and squeezed my hand in a fist to stop the shaking. I grew up in a fairly safe place. Well, I know it won't make this easier, but you did the right thing killing that man. Looking up, Scott seemed to get lost in thought. I remember when I first became an adventurer, assholes like them were everywhere. It used to be you couldn't trust anybody even up there in Orario, much less down here. I take it that's not the case anymore? Things are kept in order pretty well nowadays, but you never know, a single mistake is all it takes for something like Evilus to come back. He sighed and scratched at his stump again. That's why you have to kill those bastards as soon as you can, those kind of people never stop unless you make them. Fuck, I'd much rather people get judged and sent to jail or something, but I could understand his point of view, in such might makes right society killing bandits before they could cause damage or grow too strong was probably the best I could hope for. Still didn't make me feel better about killing someone though. Anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for helping Mord, we all owe you one. I wasn't really thinking about him at the time, I confessed, embarrassed. I still didn't know why I had attacked the Viver like that, but saving Mord had only been a minor consideration, it was more that I couldn't help myself. Everything had been happening so fast. All the blood, fear and excitement of the fight had gotten to my head and I couldn't bring myself to do the logical thing. Scott gave me a strange look but eventually shook his head. No matter the reason, you saved my friend and that's all I care about. I suppose I too wouldn't care about why someone saved me as long as I got to live. After that we just watched as the adventurers worked around us as fast as they could. I thought about helping out but with only one good arm and no idea what I was supposed to do, I'd probably just get in the way. Soon all 7 wagons were filled with cages and the caravan started going up. I watched as Guile was made to help pull one of the wagons and Mord was put to work fighting monsters ahead of us. Without an arm, both Scott and I were left closer to the wagons so we could deal with any wounded monster that got away from the fighters without having to stop the wagons or raise the alarm in case of something we couldn't deal with. The tall man in full plate constantly walked around our caravan, making sure everything was in order or yelling at everyone involved when a wagon had to stop, but we were still advancing fast for people completely on foot, going up 2 floors in 4 hours. Why did they hire more people, I asked Scott as I retrieved one of his daggers from a dead Lamia Mormos. All around me, I could see idle adventurers talking and joking with each other. It looked like the Ganesha Familia could do this with half those people. From what I understand, Ganesha called most of his adventurers back for something he said, wiping the dagger with a cloth before putting it back in place. Hashana was the only powerhouse left to deal with the monsters, so they had to hire a few people just to make sure. Don't want to risk monsters spawning all around and ruining everything. We soon reached another open space, and Hashana Dorlia, the huge man in full plate, called for a full stop while casually stomping on the head of a minotaur. We sat down in a circle and waited until Mord came back from monster extermination to start eating. The man was covered in sweat and panting hard, still not completely recovered from the blood loss. Are we really gonna reach Orario today? I asked. It was already midday and we were still in the middle of the 15th floor. Don't worry about it, the upper floors are much smaller and the monsters are hardly a challenge. After the 10th floor, it'll only take us 2 to 3 hours to reach Orario at most. That made sense. The place we were in was an oppressive cave system made from bare rock and filled with dark corridors. The air was humid and shadows flickered everywhere. If I didn't have my eye, I was sure it would be very easy to become lost. Worse yet, I had to stay alert to avoid any stray level 2 monster lest they spawn on top of me or rush the carts before I could avoid them, but from what I remember from the anime, the upper floors are much better illuminated and had human-sized monsters at most. Yo Mord, good to see you're alive. Came the strong male voice as Hashana himself dropped beside me and took off his helmet. Who's the new guy? A little too skinny for Ogma, don't you think? I resent that, mumbled Scott while biting on a piece of jerky, but everyone just ignored him. He's a level 1 we found on Rivera, got abandoned by his party down there when the Goliath spawned and needed some money, so we hired him as a porter for a little while, Mord answered while shaking the man's hand. He's a good one, actually own him my life, you know. Really? Which familia are you from anyway? Yeah, about that. I scratched at my neck trying to think of something, but decided some of the truth was good enough. My god, is strange, he never actually told me his name. Adi said while scratching at his chin. Then again, my own god spent all our money transforming our home into a huge statue of himself with the entrance at his crotch, so I can't really judge. Ogma is mostly okay, but he does have his oddities. Mord shrugged while laying down on the floor for a rest. Not telling you his name seems like the kind of thing Loki would find amusing. Hashana mused, then put a hand on his own chest and made some grabbing motions. You sure it wasn't a petite woman? Loki straight as a door, she could pass as a man if she tried. Pretty sure it wasn't Loki, I answered and decided it was best to change the subject. Why do you guys go to all this trouble to get dungeon monsters anyway? Ganesha finds it amusing, mostly taking a sip from his water bag. Hashana stretched his arms and sighed. I mean, pretty much everything that happens in Orario is because one god or another finds it amusing, but the monster feriados give us a good amount of money. A lot of people pay to see the monsters outside the dungeon, plus the chance to practice taming without having to worry about other monsters or having backup is good, said Scott. Adventurers can't keep monsters on the city, and there's always a risk when trying to tame something in the dungeon. How does taming even work anyway? I asked Scott, now genuinely curious. Hey, don't look at me, he's from the taming family, he said, pointing to Hashana. Hein, let your Uncle Dorley enlighten you. I'm not a tamer myself but, as I understand it, the dungeon creates monsters with set instructions he says, while using the handle of his axe to draw a little goblin on the floor, a newly spawned monster will always follow that set of instructions to the letter. The goblin will always try to jump at you and stab you in the face, a firebird will always pause in the air and spew flames, it gets really predictable after a while. The longer the monster has been alive the more it learns, it adapts and grows, a tamer takes advantage of that to teach the monster to obey. The best way is to show it how futile fighting is and make it fear getting punished. Every dungeon monster hates adventurers, so it may take some time and practice to make it fear more than it hates, but after you have done it to the same kind of monster enough, you learn how to do it faster. Plus you'll probably get a skill. Could you tame a monster like a normal animal? Using rewards and kindness I mean. Theoretically. It is possible but I have never seen it work. I once heard Shakti say I'd just take too long to overcome the instinctual hate Hashanah told me, and then smirk doesn't stop some fool from trying every year, very amusing. Patting my shoulder Hashanah put his helmet back on and pushed himself back to his feet anyway, I'd better make sure Murita has everything in order for us to move on, hey Murita. He shouted towards a sweating Madaka and left us. Thinking about trying your hand at taming. Maybe I told him while lost in thought it sounds interesting enough. Could I use illusions to make taming faster? In Naruto there were genjutsu that messed with an enemy's sense of time, could I make something like that? Soon we were moving again, and I had to kill a wounded hellhound as it tried to spew flames at me. After what Hashanah had told me, I made sure to watch the monsters closely and quickly found a pattern to their movements. It made predicting them with a sharingan much easier. 6 hours later we finally reached the 10th floor and the caravan started to pick up the pace. Hashanah himself grabbed the wagon with the most monster and pulled it alone while the adventurers took care of the small fry and, in only 2 hours, we were pulling the wagons through the dungeon entrance. My first look of Orario was underwhelming. Babel itself was impressive I admit, but I had lived in a modern city my entire life. The tower was wider than anything I had seen, but it didn't seem all that much taller than a skyscraper. The city itself was huge, probably larger than any medieval city of my world, and much better built. The streets were clean, and the buildings looked both new and well built, but, again, it didn't reach the level of a modern city, or have any wondrous aspect I had come to expect from a fantasy world. No floating islands, no clearly magical castle, no spells flying everywhere. Orario most resembled a well-preserved historical city, sparsely dotted with modern houses and mansions. Come on, it's the Ganesha Familia problem now said Mort as he pushed me away from the entrance, let's go sell our lot to the guild so we can get your money. Seeing us leaving Hashanah waved at us, see you at Ishtar's place later tonight. Mord looked at Scott's missing arm and sighed, can't, we're gonna have to save money from now on. Reaching the guild Mord quickly found a mature redeed with wolf-like ears on top of her head. Rose-chan marry me. The werewolf. Wolf Beast King. I didn't really remember the name of her race. Rose gave Mort an unamused glare before her eyes flashed to my own cast and Scott's missing arm. I see you're still being greedy Mr. Latro. How many times have I told you not to delve too deep without a bigger group? Come on Rose, don't be like that. Enough, if you're not gonna hear my advice the least you could do is not waste my time, she snorted, but there was a glint of pain on her eyes that said she cared far more than she was showing. And who's the new party member? I have never seen him before. Roland Sinclair miss, and I'm not really registered with the guild, yet I told her, earning some odd looks from all four of them. I see she said, and I swear I saw a vein pulsating on her forehead. She calmly rolled the documents on her hand into a tight cylinder and wiped her arm around, hitting Mort in the face with her new weapon. What the hell are you doing bringing an unregistered adventurer in the dungeon? I had nothing to do with it. Mord protested as he tried to shield himself from the enraged receptionist. We found him already in Rivera and just gave him a ride to the surface. And you, what were you doing down there? Her cold eyes froze me in place. Damn, she was hot. La Familia was playing a prank on me. Thank God I remembered the excuse I had used before. It had worked well enough, and no way was I telling them I sprouted from the dungeon like some kind of humanoid monster. It was my turn to get hit with her rolled up papers. If you're not gonna tell the truth, at least make up a better lie. I scratched at the place she hit me and looked at the party with confusion, but they just shrugged. Yeah, we didn't buy the prank thing too, but as long as you did your job as a porter, we weren't going to pry. Great, it seems I'm a terrible liar. Here, Rose told me as she handed me a sheet of paper. Fill this up, get your god to sign it and bring it back to me tomorrow. Ah, is the god signature really necessary? Rose gave me another glare and shook her head in exasperation when she saw I was being serious. Yes, just so you know, the guild can't stop you from entering the dungeon, but we won't buy any lot from you or give you any quests if you aren't registered. I highly suggest you fill that up. Half an hour later I left the guild 65,000 valis richer. Mord and his party were going to sell the Viver's drops apart, but they had enough money to pay my 10% out of their own pockets. Night had started to fall on Orario. The party invited me to stay with them at the Ogma Familia's house, but I declined. I had never heard of Ogma before, but as a god, he was probably some kind of asshole. Orario was well illuminated at night, there was light coming from inside almost every house, and the streets were filled with tall lamps which used monster cores instead of electricity to generate light. The sky still wasn't pitch black yet, and I kept to the wider streets filled with adventurers, so I didn't have any problems, and people were relaxed, walking around without any worries. It seems like things really were kept safe. They weren't even watching their coin pouch. Looking around, I briefly wondered if Belle was already in the city. Had I arrived years before the start of the story? Years later. Reaching one of Orario's main streets, I had a clear view of the giant wall that encircled the city, second only to Babel itself. The wall rose above the city, making me feel like a titan would soon start bashing his body against it. Not completely impossible with the dungeon here, but very unlikely. My stomach gave a growl of protest, causing the few people walking around me to give me strange looks. I had been eating frequently, but with all the healing potions in my body, I was burning energy at an alarming rate, and it left me starving. Asking around, it turns out the Hostess of Fertility was actually the closest place to grab a meal. I made sure to ask various people to make sure, but everyone I talked to said it was a little expensive, but had good food and drink. Plus, if Ryu was already working there, I could find out at what point in the timeline I arrived without being too suspicious. It was also a good place to ask for somewhere to stay the night. I didn't really like that someone would know where I was staying, and, from what I remember, the girls there were too strong to bother with a lone level 1. The pub seemed to be bursting with activity, its lights were on, and I could hear loud laughter from inside, with a constant stream of clients walking in and out of the building, looking satisfied and not too drunk. Pushing the doors open, I stepped into the room and looked around for a table or corner I could sit. The pub was almost full, but there was an entire empty table by a corner and a few spots at the counter. It left me feeling a little too open, but since I was alone, I sat down at the bar and gave a polite smile to the waitress in front of me, a human girl with bluish-gray hair, who seemed to be staring at me with an expression that seemed both baffled and a little afraid. "Do you have a menu or something?" I asked after a second or two when her stare started to make me uncomfortable. A shiver ran down my spine, and I suddenly felt like a mouse being stared at by an entire clatter of cats. Briefly glancing back, I saw two catgirls frowning at me from across the room, their eyes narrowed to slits and shining with a predatory light. One of them was even gently caressing a kitchen knife. The mug hit the counter in front of me with unnecessary force, splashing me with ale and almost making me jump. Turning around, I saw a huge dwarf woman glaring, her arm bigger than my tight. "You're new around here," she said while handing me a menu and putting an arm around the waitress, her bulging muscles clear for all to see. "How do you know, dear sir?" "I don't." I swallowed and said, my voice full of confusion, a drop of sweat slowly running down my face. "Humph, back to work with you now," the dwarf snorted and pushed her employee away from me. I tried to open the menu, but she swiped it out of my hand. "I'll get you a soup, you seem like you need a soup." I watched as she walked back to the kitchen. I wanted to tell her I didn't like soup, but I had started to feel yet another glare at my back and didn't dare open my mouth. What the hell was that? I had never been in Orario before. Fuck, I had never been in this world before. There's no way a random girl recognized me. If I remember correctly, the waitresses at the pub were all fairly strong former adventurer. Did she have some kind of skill that triggered when looking at me? And why the hell would it cause such reaction? Wait, in Norse mythology Loki could shapeshift. Had I already gotten his attention after saving those elves? But then why the fear? Shaking my head again, I looked at the mug of ale and shrugged before starting to drink. Before long, a green-haired elf brought me my soup, her eyes narrowed in suspiciousness as she served me. Ryu Lion looked exactly as I thought she would. She was a petite woman with delicate but sharp features. Her skin was pale, but it didn't look unhealthy. "Thanks," I sighed as I tried to avoid her angry eyes. Didn't Ryu kill a lot of people before retiring? Swallowing hard, I forced myself to take a sip of the soup. I was surprised when it actually tasted pretty good. Diving into my food, I lost track of things around me as I satiated my growing hunger. "Hey, I want a refill here." I was almost finished with my meal when a tall man hit my cast with an elbow and shouted in my ear, "Ugh, this is why I prefer to sit with my back against a wall." Turning to glare at the drunken idiot, I met the eyes of the gray-haired werewolf and spewed soup all over his tattooed face. Face soaking wet, Betloga stared at me in confusion for a second before what happened truly registered. Loud laughter burst out from the Loki Familia's table as I saw a vein starting to throb on Bet's forehead. "Fuck, I forgot they came here often to party." "God damn it," had the waitress called them. "Why you?" Bet growled almost beyond words, grabbing me by the shirt. I couldn't resist his strength as he lifted me up with one hand. How dared a weakling like Ga? In my defense, I wasn't really thinking straight. Despite my best efforts, I was still feeling on edge from fighting in the dungeon, and meeting the Loki Familia was an unexpected and unwelcome surprise. Worse, as Bets lifted me up and started shouting into my face, my mind flashed back to the man choking me and shouting inside the dungeon. Our eyes meet for a brief moment, then my own eye spun into the Manjiku on instinct, and I sent him the pain illusion I had crafted earlier while trying to grab for my sword. The illusion broke almost instantaneously, his level far too high for it to last even a full second, but it still had an effect. Grabbing at his face, Bet grunted in surprise and threw me away, sending my body flying through the pub, hitting my head against the wooden wall. I blacked out. Chapter 7. I think you killed him, Bet said, a highly amused female voice somewhere above me. Yep, wonder what punishment the guild is going to give you, said a second woman. This one seemed to be a little too cheerful for the situation. Damn it, it's not my problem he was such pathetic weakling. Bastard, it's not like he started life as a level 6 for fuck's sake, damn asshole. I tried to push myself up and tell him just that, but even my lips weren't working right. I only managed to squirm on the soft bed and mumble a little. Hey. I think he's alive, said the first voice, and I felt someone bending over my body to check. Yep, seems pretty alive to me. You guys think his god is gonna want to cause trouble for this? Gee, not likely, he's probably from some 2-bit familia anyway, said Bet with disdain, and I heard him stomp away from me. Pity, everything's been so boring nowadays. I could use a wargame. Loki-sama, even if he did die, I don't think anyone would challenge us to a wargame in Orario, said yet a third female voice. Aline-chan, so respectful. Loki herself shouted and jumped out of the bed, sending a jolt of pain running through my body. Shit, how the hell did I end up in the same room as Loki himself? For fuck's sake, if I knew it would turn out this way I'd have stayed in the dungeon a while longer. At least monsters are open about their intentions. Unable to move my body, I started to panic. What if I was inside his secret dungeon? What if he found out I wasn't from this world? What kind of powers did the gods of this world even have? When I started to hear chanting coming from beside me, I finally managed to open my tired eyes. Standing there and carefully chanting some kind of spell was a young human with straight black hair and glasses. One of her hands was open and pointing at me, while her other tried to fend off a very petite Loki, who was trying to push his face against her breasts. At the door was one of the Amazonas sisters and a perfectly average guy about my age fidgeting with a sword at his waist. In desperation, I tried to push myself away from whatever spell they were trying to cast, but my limbs didn't want to move and I couldn't even feel my legs. Then a green light washed over me, making me feel warm all over. The last thing I saw was Loki's pensive gaze as she stared at my face. I woke up feeling much better. Taking stock of the situation, I saw that I was still laying on the same bed, but my clothes had been changed. There were no metal bars around the windows and door, or any chains locking my limbs. Even better, my arm seemed to be healed. Just how long had they kept me sleeping in here? Pushing myself into a sitting position, I touched my face to see they had also healed my eyes somehow. Pushing a little bit of magic, I felt I could even activate the Manjiku from both eyes. Again, thought using Kodamatsukami from the one that had been wounded was still decades beyond me. I was utterly confused. With my mind clear once again, I could admit I had massively overreacted by attacking Bet. I wouldn't be surprised if they left me to my own luck or even finished me off, so why heal me? Well, I suppose Loki had to appear benevolent to convince everyone he was a good guy until his sudden and inevitable betrayal. Opening the door, the same human girl walked inside carrying a tray of food. Ah, you're awake, laying the tray beside my bed. The girl bowed at the waist until she reached a 90-degree angle. I'm really sorry. What? I know Bet-sama acts rude, but he was really worried about having hurt you. The asshole brutal werewolf who threw me into a wall was worried about hurting me. Sure, let's pretend I believe that. Ugh, where am I? Well, at first Fin-sama was just going to pay for a room at the Insect Familia's pharmacy, but once Ramilia told us you were one of the guys who saved her, Loki decided to bring you into the house. She fidgeted with her dress. She wanted to apologize personally. My eyes briefly glanced at the windows, and I wondered if we were on the ground floor and how much I'd hurt if it turned out we weren't, but sighed and accepted my fate. It seems like I'd be meeting Loki himself despite everything. Why the hell did the god of a major familia want to meet with a level 1 adventurer anyway? Was he just that bored? How long was I out of it? I was told it'd take at least a week to heal my arm. I asked and waved my perfectly healthy arm for her to see. Ah, don't worry, you didn't lose that much time. She hurried to say and blushed. It's only been 2 days, but since it had been Bet-sama who hurt you, I have been casting a healing spell at least 3 times a day on your body. You should be perfectly fine. Well, at least it seems I had gotten free healing out of the entire thing. It only took getting thrown into a wall by an angry werewolf and being forced to meet one of the worst gods I had ever read about. Yay. Can't I just leave without meeting Loki? I'm sure your god is a busy person. There's no need for him to bother with such lowly adventure. I knew it was a thin hope, but I had to try anyway. I didn't even do that much after all. Well, you see, she fidgeted once again before bowing once again and finally answering, I'm sorry, but Loki-sama insists on meeting you. Fuck, I mumbled, causing the girl to look up. I'm sorry, what? I said, when can I meet him anyway? I'm going to tell her you're awake right away. Turning around, the girl almost ran out of the room before stopping by the door once again. Sorry for Bet's actions. She left me alone on the room and I once again considered just getting up and running. There wasn't anyone guarding the door and, looking from the windows, the courtyard seemed empty. Ugh, from what I remembered the Familia was filled with level 6 and 5s. I wouldn't make it 2 blocks away from the mansion before they caught me anyway. Plus there was still the chance that they really just wanted to apologize. From what I remember, Loki did have a good reputation in Orario. It was possible this was all just an act to make them look even better for the rest of the city. Looking at the tray of food left beside my bed, I picked a croissant from it and gave it a sniff. It was unlikely they'd poison it, but you never know. Ugh, since when had I become this paranoid? Next thing I knew, I'd only drink from my own flask and start yelling constant vigilance at random people. I mean, it was a good motto to live by, but I didn't want to look too crazy. Deciding to take a risk, I ate the damn croissant and then proceeded to devour the rest of the food. Poison be damned, I was starving again and it tasted good. If I was going to die, I'd do it on a full stomach. I had finished everything and was putting all my gear on when the girl came to get me and lead me into Loki's study itself. Just before we entered, she laid a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Just a warning, Loki-sama has a little problem with her lack of chest, but she's very much a woman, alright." The girl warned me with a very serious voice, "Please don't call her a him" to her face. I nodded. I briefly wondered if Loki was really female here or if it was just a phase for the shape-shifting god of lies. Well, if she wanted to be treated as a woman, I could oblige no matter the truth. The room was huge with a planning table behind which sat Finn and Loki, with Gareth and Rivera behind them. Despite the hopeless situation, my eyes still glanced around trying to find escape routes before they settled on a map spread in front of the 4 of them. "You're here, good," said Finn as he got up from his chair. It didn't make a huge difference in his height. Glancing from the map to his face once again, I said, "I'm sorry, if I'm interrupting something I can go." Then I saw Loki's face. She had her crimson eyes open and I could glimpse the intelligence and cunning behind her facade for a moment. It sent a shiver down my spine, but then it was gone, leaving me to wonder if I had even seen it after all. "Nonsense," said the Norse god as she slammed her hands down on the table and smiled. "You're the one who saved dear Remilia's breasts, of course we can make some time for you." Ahem, despite Loki's outburst, we really wanted to apologize personally, said Finn before he slightly bowed his head. "Despite the help you provided for a member of our familia, bet Loga still hurt you. I apologize. Is there anything we can do for you to make up for it?" Finn only bowed his head for a second, but it was still an apology from a level 6 adventurer. "I really doubt I'd receive another in my stay in this world, unless I reach level 7 myself." "Ah, there's really no need. I did overreact when he hit me at the Hostess of Fertility, so it's kind of my fault." "I insist," said Loki as she walked around the table and approached me. I tried not to flinch when she stared at my face. She walked around me and almost touched me once or twice, causing a drop of sweat to run down my stiff face, before nodding to herself as if coming to a decision. "Yep, as I thought, you're not my type. Oh, thank the gods, pity, or I'd offer you a spot on my familia. Still, you deserve a compensation." Looking at Loki's top executives, I saw both Rivera and Finn covering their faces in shame at their god's actions, but Gareth seemed to agree with her. "Yep, you're still a little too green to join the Loki familia, too little muscles, too much fat," he nodded while caressing his beard. Damn, I didn't want to be anywhere near Loki, and having them be indebted to me was better than the other way around. It was still an unwanted connection. Taking a moment to think about it, I caught sight of my missing fingers and decided to try my luck. Would asking for help with my hand be too much? I asked, hoping they'd think it was enough to even the scores. All 3 turned to Rivera. Well, the tall elf thought about it and nodded. "Any potion capable of regrowing pieces of a body, even just the fingers, is too expensive, but if you're willing to accept a prosthetic from Die Insect, something for just your fingers wouldn't be above what we're willing to finance." "There you have it." Loki shouted and suddenly grabbed my hand, almost causing me to strike out. She looked at my missing fingers and gave an exaggerated sigh. "It pains me to say Emilia's breasts are only worth 2 fingers, but that old bastard's prosthetics really are expensive." "Good, we'll make an order to Die Insect tomorrow," Finn said as he made a note on some document. "You'll just have to go to their pharmacy for a fitting then. I also imagine Remilia and Kalos will want to thank you themselves some time later." But Remilia is out, and reattaching his legs has left Kalos extremely tired, Gareth told me. Then again, they're elves, so what do I know? Rivera gave him a glare, but even I could see there was no anger there. That settled. Finn waved me away, and they returned to discussing the map spread over the table. As the doors to the studio were about to fully close, I swear I saw Loki open her eyes again and smirk as she stared at me from inside. Fuck, that gave me the creeps. Line helped me navigate through Loki's Twilight Manor and even gave me some tips for where to find an inn. Of course I wouldn't follow then, no need to let anyone know where I'd be staying, but it was nice of her to make small talk. A few moments later I was finally back into the streets of Orario and feeling like I had just dodged a bullet. I couldn't decide if Loki had really just been doing a publicity stunt or had some sinister plan, but for the moment I was out of her sights and free. That had to be enough. I hurried away from the house, walking as fast as I could without appearing to run away and only stopping when I was almost back inside the tower and couldn't even see the building. Finding an inn inside the city turned out to be much easier than I thought. Orario was filled with travelers, merchants and other wandering adventurers, and there was an inn for every single one of them. From a flea-filled hospital full of communal rooms for those with nothing to their names to luxurious rooms inside the tower itself and anything in between. I chose a small house just beside the city's walls. It looked clean and had reasonable rooms, each one big enough for a single bed, a footlocker to keep clothes and other equipments on, a table with 2 chairs, and there was even a small fireplace where I could heat up some tea. It worked by consuming a magic stone, what they call the monster cores outside of the dungeon, so there was no chance of burning down the building. The owner, a tall woman who was missing a leg, wanted 800 valis a day, but I managed to get her down to 500 for the entire month by paying in advance. It would be a pain in the ass if I had to ditch the place before the month was over, but I could afford it. Especially after getting free healing and a replacement for my fingers from Loki's Familia. Looking at my hand I briefly considered not going to the dye insect pharmacy for the damn fitting, but decided it would be far too suspicious, plus I really couldn't resist the chance to regain full use of the hand. Just finding the right place had taken me most of the day, so I just spent some time checking the room, making sure the door was locked and spent some time perfecting my illusions. I couldn't actually practice them without a target, but I could start building new ones while trying to remember some from Naruto. Taking off most of my clothes I made sure I kept a dagger easily accessible below my pillow and some pants on. It wouldn't do to have to fight naked if I was attacked while sleeping. Then I laid down on the unexpectedly soft bed and started thinking about my new life. How the hell would I register at the guild without a proper god to sign those papers? I could certainly forge them, but would that even work? Didn't the gods of Orario have to participate in some kind of meeting from time to time? Plus gods could tell if someone was lying. It would only take a single one asking me about it and I was fucked. I could use my last Kodamatsukami to convince a god he had taken me in, but would that even work? The anime never made it clear just how powerful the gods were or how limited they became when down here in the mortal world. Were they just playing around and the only reason they didn't start using their divine might was because it would make things boring, or were their powers actually sealed and they were little better than mortals? Letting my head rest against the pillow I sighed. I just didn't know enough. I suppose I didn't really need to register to be an adventurer. The guild may have a monopoly on magic stones, but I could live just by selling the monster drops. Looking over my own body I pinched my belly and sighed. I wasn't fat, but I had been a little out of shape when I died, and the creature hadn't changed that when it reincarnated me. My new Felna made me far stronger than an average man, but it wouldn't hurt to get back into shape before finally starting to dungeon delve again. Plus it would give me time to create more illusions and copy the fighting styles of adventurers with a sharingan. Yes, I'd take my time and prepare. There was no hurry after all. The world wasn't about to end tomorrow, and I hadn't made any enemies that wanted to kill me yet. Closing my eyes I went to sleep. Waking up the next morning I made sure to start a new routine. I had never been to an academy before, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to start by emulating Saitama himself. Even with my Felna I couldn't immediately do 100 sit-ups, push-ups and squats, but I managed to do half that and a 10-kilometer jog in the first day before going to dye insect for a fitting. It seems Loki was true to her word, and they informed me my prosthetics would be ready in a little over a month. On a whim I asked how much it would cost for a personal health consultation with the god, and they informed me the old man wouldn't move for anything less than 200,000 valis, but I could get half an hour of air mids for only 20,000 if I was willing to get into a waiting list. Bernadette, the nurse who was taking my hand's measurements, warned me that her captain got very angry when someone wasted her time with nothing to treat, but I figured it was worth a shot and got myself a consultation in 3 weeks. Who knows how magic granted by the gods would affect the damage done by the use of the sharingan. Maybe with enough money I wouldn't even have to worry about going blind. In the afternoon I went to the Colosseum to watch the adventurers sparring with each other. Most of the place was filled with Ganesha Philimia members preparing everything for the monster philia, but there were still 2 or 3 pairs working out on the sand, and I eagerly copied their every move. I still needed to practice the moves if I wanted to make them my own, but one of the advantages of being an Orario is that nobody looked at me oddly if I started waving my sword around, as long as I didn't threaten anyone while doing so. Without a TV or computer to grab my attention, I spent the entire day working hard, arriving at the inn soaked in sweat, took a quick shower, and spent a few hours working on the visualization of my illusions. I still didn't feel all that safe inside my room, always keeping at least a dagger close by, and always felt like there was someone watching me. I even activated the Manjiku every once in a while, but never caught anyone following me. From time to time I meet up with Mortar Scott as I ran in the morning, but they were always busy trying to raise money and didn't have time to talk. They too had asked the Loki Familia for help buying a new arm for Scott. Unfortunately, turns out an entire working arm was far more complex and thus expensive than just a few fingers, so they still had to make up the difference with their own money. As the days went by, my body improved. I quickly managed to hit and overcome my goal of 100 repetitions on the exercises and found my ability with the sword increasing at an impressive speed, but the odd sense of something observing me never really left, making me constantly on edge. What if Naruto has sharingan in danmachi? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.